What if the blood that flows through your veins carries a memory older than civilization itself? What if the face you see in the mirror is not entirely your own, but a reflection of something that came before, something that never truly left? There are questions that humanity has learned not to ask too loudly. Questions about where we truly began, about the sudden leap from scattered wanderers to builders of empires, about the strange sense, felt by so many, spoken by so few, that we do not entirely belong here. These are not comfortable questions. They do not resolve into neat answers. They ripple outward like stones dropped into still water, disturbing the surface of everything we thought we understood about ourselves. Perhaps what we call human is only half the story. Throughout history, there have been those who claim to carry something different in their veins. Royal bloodlines that insisted on their divine descent. Priests who spoke of gods walking among mortals, teaching, shaping, leaving traces of themselves in the clay of early humanity. We have dismissed these claims as mythology, as the inventions of power-hungry rulers seeking to justify their thrones. But what if dismissal is simply another form of forgetting? What if the myths were never meant to be metaphors at all? There is a loneliness that follows our species, an ache that no accomplishment quite erases, no discovery quite satisfies. We build towers that scrape the sky, yet we feel exiled. We map the genome, split the atom, reach beyond our atmosphere, and still we search for something we cannot name. As though part of us remembers belonging somewhere else, somewhere we can no longer see, but still feel in the quiet moments when the world grows dark and the stars arrange themselves in patterns that seem almost like language. Every culture that has ever existed has looked upward and wondered. The ancients did not merely see lights in the darkness. They saw witnesses. They saw home. And in their oldest stories, carved into clay and stone, they describe something that should not be possible. Visitors from those lights, beings who descended when humanity was young and formless, who mixed their essence with ours and made us what we are. We call this mythology. But perhaps mythology is simply memory translated into symbol, carried forward through generations when the literal truth became too dangerous, too vast, too shattering to speak plainly. The tablets that describe these visitors still exist. They rest in museums, silent behind glass, their cuneiform script waiting for eyes that know how to see past the comfortable distance of academic translation. The symbols speak of creation, but not the gentle metaphorical creation of religious allegory. They speak of genetic manipulation, of deliberate design, of beings who came with purpose and left with the work unfinished. Or perhaps not left at all, perhaps only hidden, perhaps only waiting. Close your eyes and drift with me, not through waters this time, but through the dust of ancient Mesopotamia, where the first words were written and the first secrets were buried beneath the foundation of what we call civilization. They say that somewhere in the strands of what makes us, there breathes a memory of those who shaped the clay of humanity itself. They say their descendants walk among us still, carrying bloodlines that have been carefully preserved through millennia. They say the creators never truly departed. Their name surfaces in the oldest fragments of human record, carved into tablets that predate history's accepted beginning. Anunnaki. Even the word feels ancient, as though it belonged to a time before language learned to forget. It arrives in cuneiform, pressed into clay tablets that have survived 5,000 years, longer than any empire, longer than any religion that now claims dominion over truth. The symbols themselves seem weighted with something beyond mere phonetic meaning. Those who from heaven to earth came, not metaphor, not poetic flourish, a statement of fact, recorded by scribes who believed they were documenting not mythology, but history, lineage, and law. The Sumerian civilization appeared in southern Mesopotamia around 4000 BCE, and with it came texts that described beings who predated human memory. The Anunnaki were not abstract deities dwelling in unreachable realms. They had names: Anu, the Skyfather, ruler of the heavens; Enlil, lord of the wind and earth, administrator of the planet; Enki, the water-bearer, master of knowledge and genetic science. For that is what the texts describe when they speak of him shaping humanity in the waters of the Absu. These were not symbols of natural forces. They were individuals with genealogies, with conflicts, with very specific roles in a hierarchy that stretched from the heavens to the mines beneath the earth. The tablets speak with a clarity that makes scholars uncomfortable. They describe the Anunnaki's purpose: to extract gold from this planet, to ship it elsewhere, to labour in conditions that eventually became unbearable. And so, according to the Atrahasis and the Enuma Elish, they created workers. The texts use the word Lulu, the mixed one, the hybrid. They describe Enki and the mother goddess Ninhursag mixing the essence of the Anunnaki with that of early hominids, creating a being intelligent enough to follow complex instructions, but subservient enough to serve without question. We are taught to read these accounts as creation myths, as humanity's primitive attempt to explain its own existence through divine narrative. Yet the Sumerians were not primitive. They did not emerge from Stone Age darkness, fumbling towards civilization. They arrived with sophisticated mathematics, with detailed astronomical charts, with legal codes and architectural principles already fully formed. They had writing before they had pottery. They mapped the solar system with an accuracy that should have been impossible without telescopes. They described the planets, including Uranus and Neptune, invisible to the naked eye, with characteristics that modern astronomy only confirmed millennia later. Perhaps the tablets should be read, not as myth, but as archive, as the records of those who knew because they had been told, or because they still remembered. Zechariah Sitchin, the controversial scholar who spent decades translating these texts, suggested that the Anunnaki were not supernatural, but technological, beings from another world who possessed science we interpreted as magic. Mainstream academia dismissed his work, pointing to translation liberties and speculative leaps. Yet even his critics acknowledged the strangeness of the source material, the specificity of the genealogies, the detailed descriptions of genetic experimentation, the matter-of-fact tone with which the tablets discuss creation not as miracle, but as procedure. The Sumerian king list presents another unsettling pattern. It catalogues rulers stretching back before the flood, their reigns measured not in years but in epochs, tens of thousands of years for single kings. Then the flood comes, described in the same tablets, and afterward the reigns become human in length, as though something changed, as though those who ruled before the cataclysm were not the same species as those who ruled after, or perhaps as though the original bloodlines had diluted, the Anunnaki genes spreading thinner through successive generations of mixing with purely human stock. Every ancient Near Eastern culture carried fragments of the same story. The Akkadians called them Anunnaki. The Babylonians knew them as those who came from the heavens. The Assyrians preserved their names in slightly altered form. Even the Bible contains echoes: the Nephilim, the sons of God who came down to the daughters of men and produced offspring, the mighty ones of old. Different languages, different emphases, but always the same core narrative. Beings from above, mixing with humanity. Leaving descendants, what makes the Sumerian account distinct is not merely its age, but its refusal to mystify. The Enuma Elish does not speak of creation through divine word alone, but through genetic manipulation in laboratory conditions. Enki does not breathe life into clay through supernatural power. He combines biological materials according to a specific formula, adjusting the mixture until the desired result is achieved. The tablets describe failed attempts, prototype humans that did not survive or could not reproduce. They describe the Anunnaki debating ethics, arguing over whether creating an intelligent slave race violated cosmic law. They describe, in short, not gods, but scientists. Powerful, long-lived, technologically advanced, but recognizably similar in their methods to what humanity itself now attempts in genetics laboratories around the world. For millennia, these texts were buried. Then, when archaeology unearthed them, they were translated into comfortable distance, interpreted as primitive allegory rather than uncomfortable possibility. Yet the tablets themselves resist such easy dismissal. They speak with the voices of those who believed they were recording truth, who preserved genealogies because lineage mattered, because some bloodlines carried more of the original mixture than others, because the descendants of Anunnaki and human unions were different, were meant to rule. If the Sumerians spoke truth, then civilization did not arise from human ingenuity alone. It was taught. And if it was taught, then perhaps what we call history is only the most recent chapter of a much longer story, one in which humanity has never truly been alone, has never been entirely its own creation, has always carried within its cells the memory of those who shaped the clay. And if the tablets speak truth, then their greatest creation was not their cities or their knowledge, it was us. There is something unsettling about the birth of civilization. It does not crawl from darkness into light. It does not stumble forward through centuries of trial and error, leaving behind layers of primitive attempts. It arrives complete, as though remembered rather than invented, as though someone had already written the blueprint and humanity simply rediscovered the pages. Sumer appeared around 4000 BCE in the fertile valleys between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and with its appearance came an explosion of sophistication that archaeologists still struggle to explain. Writing emerged not as crude pictographs, gradually refined over generations, but as a fully developed cuneiform system capable of recording complex legal contracts, astronomical observations, and mathematical calculations. The wheel, irrigation systems, the plough, architectural principles, astronomical charts, all appearing within a remarkably compressed time frame, as though delivered in a single package rather than accumulated through slow discovery. Other civilizations show their progression. Egypt's pyramids grew from mastabas, which grew from simple burial mounds. China's writing evolved through visible stages from oracle bones to standardized characters. But Sumer's sophistication seems to arrive without ancestry, without the fumbling early stages that mark genuine invention. The Sumerians had advanced mathematics before they had widespread literacy. They mapped the heavens with precision before they had developed advanced metallurgy. The sequence feels wrong, as though someone had taught them the advanced courses before the foundational ones. Their astronomical knowledge presents perhaps the deepest mystery. Sumerian tablets describe the solar system with an accuracy that should have been impossible for people using only naked eye observation. They knew Earth was round and rotating. They understood the precession of the equinoxes, the slow 26,000-year wobble of Earth's axis that requires centuries of careful observation to detect. Some tablets appear to reference planets beyond Saturn, celestial bodies that remained invisible to humanity until the invention of telescopes thousands of years later. How could they know what they could not see? Perhaps more unsettling is their mathematical system. While most early cultures counted in base 10, following the 10 fingers on human hands, the Sumerians used base 60. Sexagesimal mathematics appears fully formed in their earliest texts, a system so sophisticated that we still use it today. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle. Yet no one can satisfactorily explain why early humans would naturally choose base 60 over the intuitive base 10, unless they were taught, unless someone who already understood advanced mathematics showed them a system that worked better for astronomical calculations and complex measurements. The Pythagorean theorem, credited to the Greek mathematician Pythagoras in the 6th century BCE, appears in Sumerian tablets 1,000 years earlier. Advanced algebra, geometric principles, even the concept of zero, which supposedly did not enter human consciousness until centuries later, all seem to shimmer beneath the surface of Sumerian mathematics. They calculated the circumference of circles with startling precision. They understood ratios and proportions that later civilizations would have to rediscover, as though they were working from an older textbook, one that predated their own emergence. Their legal codes display a similar, impossible sophistication. The Code of Ur-Nammu, dating to approximately 2100 BCE, and the later Code of Hammurabi established legal principles: presumption of innocence, proportional punishment, protection of the weak from the powerful, that suggest centuries of legal philosophy already refined and codified. These are not the rough justice systems of emerging civilizations. They are mature, nuanced frameworks that account for dozens of specific scenarios, as though whoever designed them had already witnessed every possible human conflict and knew how to legislate against chaos. When archaeologists excavated Ur, they found beneath the royal tombs a layer of clean clay 8 feet thick, evidence of a massive flood that had scoured the region. Below that flood layer, they found nothing. Above it, they found Sumer, already sophisticated, already writing, already calculating the movements of planets, as though civilization had not evolved upward from the mud, but had been placed there, fully formed after the waters receded. Some researchers point to older sites, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to 11,000 years ago, with its massive carved pillars arranged in perfect circles. But Göbekli Tepe only deepens the mystery. It suggests that advanced knowledge existed even earlier, then vanished for millennia before resurfacing in Sumer. As though there had been cycles before, civilizations that rose and fell and left only fragments for the next wave to rediscover. The Sumerians themselves offered an explanation for their sudden sophistication. They carved it into their cylinder seals and pressed it into their tablets. The Anunnaki taught us, they said. Beings from the heavens descended and showed us how to write, how to measure, how to build, how to organize society according to law. We did not invent civilization, we inherited it. We were given it by those who had possessed it long before Earth knew its name. Modern scholars prefer to speak of independent innovation, of human genius flowering spontaneously when conditions permitted, yet the pattern remains unsettling. Every civilization that we can trace shows gradual development, except Sumer. Every writing system shows evolution, from simple to complex, except cuneiform. Every mathematical system grows from counting to calculation, except base 60, which arrives complete and inexplicable. The Sumerians claimed they were taught by the Anunnaki, by beings who descended from the heavens when humanity was still scattered and formless. If that were true, where did those teachers go? And more unsettling still, did they truly leave? Or did they simply step back, watching their students learn to work independently? The answer may lie not in ancient tablets, but in modern blood. DNA does not lie, but it whispers in a language we are only beginning to understand. And what it whispers about human origins does not match the story we were taught. The human genome is a text written in chemical sequences, 4 billion base pairs encoding the instructions for what we are. For decades, scientists believed they could read this text like a history book, tracing our lineage back through time, watching as random mutations accumulated generation by generation, following the slow climb from simple organisms to conscious beings. But the deeper they read, the stranger the story became. Somewhere around 200,000 years ago, something changed. Human consciousness did not gradually brighten over millions of years. It ignited suddenly, in a leap that evolutionary timescales struggle to accommodate. Brain size increased dramatically. Language emerged, not primitive grunts slowly refined, but complex grammar capable of abstract thought, planning, symbolism. Art appeared, ritual, the awareness of mortality, and the question of what lies beyond it, all within a window that, in evolutionary terms, is barely a moment. Paleoanthropologists call this the Great Leap Forward, though the name itself acknowledges the mystery. Leaps are not how evolution is supposed to work. Evolution crawls across millennia, each tiny advantage slowly selected, each mutation tested against survival. Yet humans leaped, and no one can fully explain why. The fossil record offers little comfort. Between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, there should be a smooth gradient of transitional forms, each slightly more advanced than the last. Instead, there are gaps, long silences in the stone, where the connecting species should be. Then Homo sapiens appears, already modern in skull structure, already capable of everything we are capable of today. As though someone had skipped several chapters in the story and dropped us directly into the present form. When the Human Genome Project completed its mapping in 2003, researchers expected to find the straightforward evolutionary trail written in our DNA. What they found instead was complexity that resisted simple explanation. Humans share approximately 98.8% of their DNA with chimpanzees. Yet that small difference encompasses an enormous gulf in capability. More unsettling, some geneticists noted anomalies, genetic sequences that appeared suddenly in the human line without clear precursors in our primate relatives. One of these anomalies is chromosome 2. In all great apes, genetic material is organized into 24 pairs of chromosomes. Humans have only 23. At some point in our past, 2 chromosomes fused into one, a rare event that left telltale markers in our genetic code. Orthodox science explains this as a natural mutation that happened to persist, but the fusion is unique to humans. It appears nowhere else in the primate family tree, and it coincides roughly with the same time frame as the Great Leap Forward. Francis Crick, who helped discover the structure of DNA, grew increasingly convinced that life on Earth showed signs of being deliberately seeded from elsewhere. He proposed directed panspermia, the idea that microorganisms or even genetic material might have been sent to Earth by an advanced civilization, jump-starting or guiding evolution in specific directions. His peers dismissed the theory as speculative, yet Crick insisted that the mathematical improbability of life spontaneously achieving such complexity demanded unconventional explanations. Mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam, the most recent common ancestors of all living humans, existed in Africa between 150,000 and 200,000 years ago. Yet these dates are estimates, windows rather than certainties, and they describe population bottlenecks, moments when human numbers collapsed to small groups, then expanded again. What caused those collapses? What happened in those windows? The genetic code remembers the events, but not the reasons. Some researchers working outside mainstream academic channels have pointed to what they call the 223 genes. In a 2013 analysis, geneticists identified 223 genes in the human genome that appear to have no predecessors in the primate evolutionary tree. The genes simply appear, as though inserted rather than inherited. Orthodox scientists argue these genes were acquired through horizontal gene transfer, from bacteria or through other natural mechanisms. Yet the fact remains, there are sequences in human DNA that resist a standard evolutionary explanation. Even our so-called junk DNA, the vast stretches of genetic material that do not code for proteins, has proven to be far from useless. Recent studies suggest these regions regulate gene expression in complex ways, that they carry information we do not yet know how to read, that they may preserve ancestral code from far older sources than we imagined. The genome is not a simple instruction manual. It is a library, and we have barely learned the alphabet. The Neanderthal contribution to modern human genetics adds another layer of strangeness. When scientists mapped Neanderthal DNA and compared it to modern humans, they found that non-African populations carry between 1 and 4% Neanderthal genes. We interbred with them. Yet the genetic exchange was not symmetrical. Some Neanderthal genes enhanced our immune systems. Others affected brain size and cognitive function. The mixing was selective, as though certain traits were being preserved while others were allowed to fade. Lloyd Pye, a controversial researcher, claimed that skull anomalies found in various populations, including the famous star child skull, with its unusual proportions and bone density, suggested hybridization with a non-human intelligence. Mainstream science attributed such skulls to genetic disorders or artificial cranial deformation practices. Yet Pye argued that the patterns of difference were too consistent, too specific, to dismiss entirely. His claims remain unproven and perhaps unprovable, but they gesture toward the same uncomfortable question. What if human variation is not merely the result of adaptation to different climates and environments, but evidence of different ancestral mixtures? We are, genetically speaking, a young species. Yet we carry within us variations that make us individually more different from one another internally than our external appearances suggest. Two humans of different ethnicities may look quite distinct, yet their genetic similarity is profound. What varies more dramatically are the regulatory systems, the switches that turn genes on and off, the subtle architecture of expression rather than the raw code itself. As though the basic template is shared, but different populations carry different settings, different calibrations of the same underlying program. The Sumerian tablets describe a specific act of creation, the Anunnaki mixing their essence with that of early humans, creating a hybrid worker race. Enki and Ninhursag experimenting with combinations, producing failed prototypes before achieving a viable model. Modern readers interpret this as mythology, the primitive mind's attempt to explain the mystery of human origins through divine narrative. But geneticists call chromosome 2 an anomaly. They struggle to explain the 223 genes. They map sudden leaps in consciousness that do not fit the gradual arc of natural selection. They find gaps where there should be continuity, and continuity where there should be gaps. Perhaps both are describing the same event in different languages. The ancients spoke of gods mixing their blood with clay. We speak of genetic engineering, of sequences inserted or modified, of hybrid vigor and heterosis. The vocabulary has changed. The underlying concept has not. And if we carry their code, perhaps we also carry their knowledge, encoded not in memory, but in instinct. There are stones on this planet that should not exist where they rest. Blocks weighing hundreds of tons, moved across impossible distances, fitted with a precision that modern machinery struggles to match. They sit in deserts, on mountaintops, buried beneath jungles, arranged in patterns that make sense only from above, only from a perspective that early humans should never have possessed. Pyramids rise on every inhabited continent, not scattered randomly, but aligned, oriented, encoded with mathematical constants that suggest a shared instruction manual, a common teacher. Egypt's Giza complex mirrors the belt of Orion with such exactitude that it suggests not artistic interpretation, but deliberate replication. Teotihuacan in Mexico, built by a people who supposedly had no contact with Egypt, arranges its pyramids in the same stellar pattern, distances between structures, mapping the inner solar system with uncanny accuracy. In China, dozens of pyramids stand, many still unexcavated, their orientations locked to cardinal directions, with precision that requires advanced surveying knowledge. The Great Pyramid of Giza embeds within its dimensions a scale model of Earth itself. Its height multiplied by 43,200 equals the polar radius of the planet. Its base perimeter divided by twice its height yields pi, calculated to multiple decimal places. The structure sits precisely at the intersection of the longest land meridian and the longest land parallel, as though whoever designed it possessed maps of the entire globe. Yet Orthodox Egyptology dates the pyramid to approximately 2560 BCE, when humanity supposedly navigated by coastal landmarks and believed the world was flat. The stones themselves present mysteries that engineering cannot easily resolve. At Sacsayhuaman in Peru, blocks weighing over 200 tons fit together so tightly that a razor blade cannot slide between them. Yet each stone is irregularly shaped, requiring the one beside it to be custom, cut to match. No mortar binds them, only friction and impossible precision. Some surfaces show vitrification, melting that requires temperatures far beyond what Bronze Age tools could generate. Others display marks that suggest not chiseling, but cutting, as though the stone were soft when worked, then hardened afterward. Puma Punku in Bolivia challenges explanation even more directly. The andesite blocks there are machined. There is no other word that fits, with right angles exact within fractions of a degree, with holes drilled in parallel lines, with surfaces flat to tolerances measured in microns. Christopher Dunn, a precision machinist, has argued that these are not the marks of hand tools working stone, but of advanced fabrication technology, perhaps ultrasonic or laser-based, perhaps something we have not yet rediscovered. Orthodox archaeologists attribute the precision to patience and primitive tools, yet experiments attempting to replicate the work with bronze chisels and stone hammers fail to approach the original accuracy. The same architectural techniques appear across oceans that supposedly were never crossed. Polygonal masonry, irregularly shaped stones fitted together like puzzle pieces, shows up identically in Peru, on Easter Island, in Egypt, in Lebanon. The same earthquake-resistant design, the same aesthetic, the same impossible precision. Either every culture independently discovered the most difficult construction method imaginable, or someone taught the same technique to builders on opposite sides of the world. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey predates the pyramids by more than 6,000 years, yet its carved pillars display sophistication that supposedly did not exist in 10,000 BCE. Hunter-gatherers, we are told, did not build temple complexes with astronomical alignments. They did not carve detailed reliefs of animals and symbols into 20-ton limestone monoliths arranged in perfect circles. Yet Göbekli Tepe exists, and beneath it may lie even older structures, layers descending into epochs, where civilization was not supposed to exist at all. Inside the Great Pyramid, the King's Chamber contains granite blocks transported from quarries hundreds of miles away. Acoustic tests reveal that the chamber resonates at a precise frequency when struck, as though designed not as a tomb, but as an instrument, a space where sound behaves in specific, controlled ways. Similar acoustic properties appear in the chambered cairns of Newgrange in Ireland, in the temples of Malta, in structures scattered across the ancient world, all tuned to frequencies that interact with human consciousness in ways modern science is only beginning to measure. When plotted on a globe, the world's ancient megalithic sites fall along geometric patterns, ley lines, some researchers call them, that suggest a planetary grid, a network of energetically or mathematically significant locations. Giza, Nazca, Easter Island, Angkor Wat, Mohenjo-Daro, separated by oceans and millennia, yet connected by alignments that seem too precise to dismiss as coincidence. Each culture that built at these sites claimed the same origin story in different words. The gods taught us. Beings from the sky showed us where to build. The ancestors who came before the flood left instructions. The Nazca lines in Peru can only be fully appreciated from the air, yet they were created when humanity supposedly could not fly. Why design images meant to be seen from a perspective you cannot reach unless you know that perspective exists? Unless those who commissioned the designs knew that someone or something would be looking down. Ancient Sanskrit texts describe vimanas, flying machines with technical specifications detailed enough to suggest actual craft rather than mythological fancy. The Vaimanika Shastra catalogues different types of aerial vehicles, describes their power sources, explains their maneuvering capabilities, Similar descriptions appear in the Mahabharata and Ramayana, treated not as fantasy but as history, as technology that once existed and was later lost. The builders, when asked by later generations who taught them to construct such wonders, gave answers that archaeology has chosen to interpret as metaphor. The gods taught us, they said. Beings from the heavens descended and showed us how to cut stone, how to move impossible weights, how to align with stars we could not see, how to encode knowledge in form itself, so that even if the words were forgotten, the geometry would remain. What we call mythology, they called memory, and the stones still stand, silent witnesses to instruction we have convinced ourselves must have come from human ingenuity alone. Perhaps their teachers left more than knowledge. Perhaps they left descendants. Throughout history, those who rule have claimed something the ruled do not possess: sacred blood. Not metaphorically, not as poetic justification for political power. Literally, a genetic inheritance that separated them from common humanity, that gave them the right to command, to decide, to sit upon thrones while others knelt. Every ancient culture insisted on this distinction. Every royal line traced its ancestry not to human origins, but to divine ones, to gods who walked as mortals, who bred with humans and left behind offspring marked by their celestial parentage. The concept of divine right kingship appears so universally across civilizations that never contacted one another that it suggests either collective delusion or collective memory. Egyptian pharaohs were not merely appointed by the gods, they were the children of gods, carrying Ra's essence in their veins. To preserve this purity, they practiced brother-sister marriage, an incestuous tradition that modern sensibilities recoil from, but that ancient logic demanded. The divine blood could not be diluted with common human stock. It had to remain concentrated, even at the cost of genetic complications that such close breeding inevitably produces. The Sumerian king lists make the same claim with bureaucratic precision. Early rulers were not fully human. Their fathers were Anunnaki, their mothers human women chosen for the mixture. These hybrid kings ruled for impossibly long periods, thousands of years, as though their Anunnaki heritage granted extended lifespans. Then came the flood, and afterward the kings lived and died in human time frames. As though the bloodline had thinned, the original genetic contribution fading with each generation of further mixing with purely human populations. In Japan, the imperial line claims unbroken descent from the sun goddess Amaterasu. In Peru, the Inca traced their origins to Viracocha, who emerged from Lake Titicaca to teach and to father the ruling dynasties. In Mesoamerica, kings were descended from Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent who came from across the sea. Different names, different mythologies, but always the same structure. Those who rule are different, their blood is different, and that difference must be protected, preserved, passed down through carefully controlled marriages. European royalty took this obsession to genetic extremes. For centuries, royal families married only within a closed circle of other royal families, creating a web of interrelatedness so dense that haemophilia, a recessive genetic disorder requiring both parents to carry the gene, spread through virtually every ruling house in Europe. Queen Victoria carried the mutation and passed it to her children, who married into Russian, Spanish, and German royal lines, spreading the bleeding disease like a marker, a genetic signature of closed breeding meant to preserve something deemed too precious to share with commoners. The Habsburg dynasty produced similar evidence of genetic isolation. The famous Habsburg jaw, a pronounced mandibular protrusion caused by recessive genes expressing through generations of inbreeding, marked the Spanish and Austrian branches of the family until the line became so compromised it could no longer produce viable heirs. Modern geneticists studying Habsburg genealogies have calculated inbreeding coefficients that approach those of laboratory animal colonies deliberately bred for genetic uniformity. This was not accident but policy. The blood had to remain pure. Yet what were they preserving? What genetic legacy was so important that royal lines would risk extinction to maintain it? Some researchers point to the Rh blood factor as a clue. Approximately 85% of humans carry Rh positive blood, meaning their red blood cells express a particular protein on their surface. The remaining 15% are Rh negative, lacking this protein entirely. The Rh factor itself is named for the rhesus monkey, where it was first identified, and most mammals carry some version of it. But Rh negative humans do not. The protein is simply absent, as though deleted from their genetic code or never present to begin with. This absence creates a medical peculiarity. When an Rh negative mother carries an Rh positive child, inheriting the factor from an Rh positive father, her immune system may treat the fetal blood as foreign and produce antibodies against it. Without modern medical intervention, this immune response can threaten the pregnancy, particularly in subsequent births. Why would evolution produce a blood type that makes reproduction more difficult? Why would 15% of humanity carry a trait that, in ancestral populations without medical technology, would have reduced fertility? The distribution of Rh negative blood is not random. It concentrates most heavily in European populations, particularly among the Basque people of northern Spain and southern France, where rates reach 30% or higher. The Basques are themselves a genetic and linguistic anomaly, speaking a language unrelated to any other on Earth, carrying genetic markers that distinguish them from surrounding populations, existing as an isolated remnant of something older that the tide of Indo-European migration never fully erased. Some alternative researchers have suggested, tentatively and with heavy qualification, that Rh negative blood may indicate hybridization with a non-terrestrial lineage. If the Anunnaki or similar beings lacked the Rh protein, and if they mixed their genetics with early humans who possessed it, the resulting hybrids might express either trait depending on which genetic code dominated. Those who inherited more of the non-human contribution would be Rh negative. Those who inherited more of the terrestrial code would be Rh positive. The incompatibility between the two would be a marker of incomplete mixing of two biological systems that do not entirely mesh. Mainstream hematology dismisses such speculation, attributing Rh negative blood to random mutation that persisted through genetic drift. Yet the puzzle remains. The trait concentrates in royal bloodlines. It concentrates in populations that preserve ancient genetic isolation, and it creates reproductive complications that should have been selected against if it arose naturally. The biblical text references Nephilim, giants born when the sons of God came down to the daughters of men. The Book of Enoch, excluded from the canonical Bible, but preserved in Ethiopian Christianity, describes the Watchers, 200 angels who descended to Mount Hermon, took human wives, and produced hybrid offspring. These children were said to be giants, mighty beings who consumed the resources of the earth and introduced forbidden knowledge to humanity. The text describes them not as myth but as history, as real bloodlines that walked the earth before the flood came to cleanse the corruption of mixed breeding. Whether one interprets these texts as literal history or symbolic warning, the theme persists. Divine beings mixed with humans. The offspring were different, larger, stronger, longer lived, and their bloodlines had to be tracked, controlled, sometimes preserved, and sometimes eliminated, because they carried something that pure humans did not. If the Anunnaki truly mix their essence with humanity, logic suggests not all mixtures would be equal. Some bloodlines might carry more of that ancient code than others. They would be marked by physical differences, by capabilities that set them apart, by characteristics that made them natural rulers over those with less of the divine admixture. And those bloodlines perhaps would be remembered, preserved through careful marriage, protected through law and custom, and perhaps still ruling, still carrying in their veins the memory of teachers from the sky. But power is not the only inheritance. There is also the ache of exile, the sense that we do not entirely belong here. There is a loneliness that follows the human species, an ache that no achievement quite erases, no discovery quite satisfies. We stand on a planet that birthed us, yet we feel like visitors. Every other creature moves through its environment with unconscious belonging, but we alone seem exiled, perpetually searching for a home we cannot name, a place we remember only in the faintest whisper of instinct. This sense of displacement appears across cultures, across epochs, woven into the oldest stories and the newest philosophies. Religious traditions speak of a fall from grace, a separation from the divine that left humanity wandering in a diminished world. Gnostic texts describe the soul as a spark of light trapped in matter, yearning to return to its source beyond the stars. Buddhism speaks of dukkha, the fundamental dissatisfaction that permeates existence, the feeling that something is perpetually not quite right. Different vocabularies but the same underlying ache. We do not fit here the way other animals fit. Every species except ours seems perfectly adapted to its ecological niche. Wolves run for hours without strain. Birds navigate thousands of miles by instinct. Fish breathe water as naturally as thought. But humans struggle with our own planet. Our backs ache from walking upright, a recent evolutionary adaptation that left our spines vulnerable to compression and pain. Our births are difficult, dangerous, the human infant's large skull barely able to pass through the birth canal, requiring a level of intervention unknown in other mammals. We sunburn easily, our skin unable to tolerate prolonged exposure to the star that supposedly shaped our evolution. We suffer from countless ailments, allergies, autoimmune disorders, metabolic dysfunctions that suggest a species not entirely in harmony with its environment. Some researchers have noted these physiological vulnerabilities and asked uncomfortable questions. What if humans are not optimally designed for Earth because we were designed, or at least modified, elsewhere? What if our bodies carry the memory of different conditions, different gravity, different atmospheric composition? The speculation ventures into territory that academic science refuses to explore, yet the questions linger beneath the surface of our persistent discomfort. We are the only species that constantly looks upward, not merely to track weather or navigate, but to yearn, to wonder, to feel that something among those distant lights calls to us. Every human culture has mapped the stars, named them, woven them into stories that describe not merely celestial objects, but family, origin, home. The Dogon people of Mali speak of teachers who came from Sirius, bringing knowledge of that star system's binary nature, a fact that Western astronomy did not confirm until the 19th century. How did an isolated African tribe know that Sirius had a companion star invisible to the naked eye unless someone who had seen it told them? The Hopi describe emergence from previous worlds, each destroyed in turn, survivors guided by star beings to the next stage of existence. Their petroglyphs show figures descending from the sky, teaching agriculture and ceremony, then returning to the stars with a promise to watch over their children. Aboriginal Australians encode stellar maps into songlines, oral traditions that preserve astronomical knowledge across tens of thousands of years, describing themselves as descendants of sky ancestors who came down in the dreamtime when the world was young and needed shaping. Across the Pacific, Polynesian navigators speak of Hawaii, the original homeland, now beneath the waves or beyond the sky. The stories blur the distinction, as though distance and depth are the same. They sailed by stars they considered kin, following patterns inherited through generations, as though the route home were written in their blood, and they were merely reading what they already knew. Modern humanity has projected this longing outward through technology. We search for extraterrestrial intelligence, scanning frequencies, sending messages into the void, hoping that someone out there will answer, and we will finally know we are not alone. But perhaps the search is not for strangers. Perhaps it is for family, for the ones who made us and then withdrew, leaving us with a genetic homesickness we mistake for philosophical angst. The epidemic of feeling displaced, of sensing that one does not belong in this world or this body, has grown rather than diminished as civilization has advanced. More people report feeling like outsiders, like observers, rather than participants, as though they are watching human life from a slight distance, unable to fully inhabit it. Psychologists speak of dissociation, of existential anxiety, of the search for meaning in a universe that seems indifferent. But what if the feeling is not pathology, but memory? What if some part of us, encoded in sequences we do not yet understand, remembers when the Anunnaki walked among their creation, before they withdrew into waiting, leaving their hybrid children to navigate existence alone? Perhaps the tablets were right. Perhaps we are hybrids, made of earth but seeded from sky. And perhaps that is why we have never felt entirely at home, because part of us remembers when our makers were present, when the connection between heaven and earth was not metaphor, but lived experience, when the longing we now feel was not longing but simply being in the presence of those who shaped us. If they withdrew, they left clues, images carved in stone that should not exist. Sometimes the past refuses to be past. It surfaces in images that do not belong to their time, frozen in stone like photographs from an impossible age. Temple walls display what appear to be light bulbs. Tomb carvings show figures that resemble modern aircraft. Sarcophagus lids depict rulers positioned as though piloting complex machinery. These images wait in silence, offering themselves to interpretation, resisting easy dismissal, but equally resisting proof. They are neither clearly mythological nor clearly technological. They occupy the space between, where questions gather like shadows. In the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, Egypt, reliefs on the walls show cylindrical objects that bear an unsettling resemblance to modern electrical equipment. Inside the cylinders, serpentine forms extend from one end to the other, looking for all the world, like filaments inside a bulb. Lotus flowers support the cylinders at one end. Cables appear to connect them to box-like structures that could be power sources. Egyptologists interpret the images as symbolic representations of creation myths, the serpent representing divine energy, the lotus symbolizing rebirth. Yet those who view the reliefs with eyes trained in electrical engineering see something else: schematic diagrams of arc lamps, similar in principle to what would not be invented, officially, until the 19th century. At Abydos, another Egyptian temple, bears what researchers have called the helicopter hieroglyphs. Carved into stone above a doorway are glyphs that appear to depict modern vehicles: a helicopter, a submarine, possibly even a jet aircraft. Orthodox archaeology explains these as palimpsest, older hieroglyphs that were plastered over and recarved during renovations, with erosion revealing parts of both layers simultaneously, creating shapes that coincidentally resemble modern technology. The explanation is reasonable, even testable, through careful analysis of the carving depth and sequence. Yet the images remain unsettling in their specificity, in how precisely they mirror forms that should not have existed in any ancient mind. In Palenque, Mexico, the sarcophagus lid of Kinich Janab Pakal shows the Mayan ruler in what mainstream archaeology describes as his descent into the underworld. He reclines at an angle, hands positioned on controls, surrounded by elaborate machinery, flames appearing to erupt from beneath him. To those familiar with spacecraft cockpits, the image suggests something very different: an astronaut at a control panel, body positioned for thrust, hands on guidance systems, rocket exhaust visible below. Erich von Däniken made this interpretation famous in the 1960s, arguing that ancient peoples were depicting what they had actually seen. Archaeologists countered that the symbolism aligns perfectly with Mayan cosmology, that every element has meaning within their religious framework. Both interpretations fit the available evidence. The stone remains neutral, accepting either reading. Sumerian cylinder seals, rolled across wet clay to create official documents, show winged figures descending from above, sometimes surrounded by symbols that could be stars or simply decorative elements. The figures wear what appear to be wrist devices, carry objects that could be tools or weapons, stand before tree-like structures that some interpret as technological apparatus. Orthodox scholars see religious iconography, gods and their attributes rendered symbolically. Alternative researchers see equipment, technology, beings in suits or armor. The seals offer their images without commentary, leaving interpretation to the viewer's framework. The Nazca lines stretch across the Peruvian desert, massive geoglyphs visible only from the air. Monkeys, spiders, hummingbirds, and geometric patterns extend for hundreds of meters, their proportions perfect from above, but incomprehensible from ground level. Why would a culture create images meant to be seen from a perspective they supposedly could not reach? Orthodox archaeology suggests ritual pathways, astronomical alignments, offerings to mountain gods who looked down from peaks. Yet the lines are too precise, too massive, too specifically designed for aerial viewing to entirely satisfy that explanation, unless those who designed them knew that someone, or something, would be looking down. Unless flight was not impossible to them because they had witnessed it, had been carried aloft, had seen the earth from above, and wanted to leave messages visible to those who would return. Ancient Sanskrit texts describe vimanas with a technical precision that seems misplaced in religious literature. The Vaimanika Shastra catalogues different classes of aerial vehicles, explains their power sources using terminology that sounds almost like descriptions of Mercury-based propulsion systems, details their maneuvering capabilities through what could be interpreted as gravitational manipulation. The Mahabharata and Ramayana treat these craft not as divine chariots, beyond comprehension, but as technology. Advanced, powerful, but technology nonetheless. Objects that could be built, flown, destroyed. The texts describe aerial battles in terms that echo modern warfare, with weapons that produce effects resembling nuclear detonations, cities destroyed by single devices, landscapes rendered barren by weapons that burned from within. Crystal skulls, primarily associated with Mesoamerican cultures, have been the subject of intense debate. Some claim to be ancient artifacts, turn out to be modern forgeries, carved with rotary tools unavailable to pre-Columbian peoples. Yet others resist easy categorization. The Mitchell-Hedges skull, examined extensively, shows no tool marks, suggesting either extraordinary skill or manufacturing techniques not yet understood. Whether ancient or modern, real or hoaxed, the skulls have become symbols of the persistent belief that ancient peoples possess knowledge now lost, that they worked materials through methods we have forgotten or have not yet rediscovered. The Antikythera mechanism stands as perhaps the most concrete evidence that ancient knowledge was more sophisticated than conventional timelines suggest. Recovered from a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera, dated to approximately 100 BCA, the device is an analog computer of astounding complexity. Gears meshed in intricate arrangements calculate astronomical positions, predict eclipses, track the Olympic Games cycle. Nothing comparable appears in the archaeological record for another 1,000 years. It is not merely advanced for its time. It is anomalous, suggesting a level of mechanical engineering that should not exist in isolation. If one such device was built, others must have existed. If such knowledge was available, where did it come from? Where did it go? Orthodox archaeology explains each anomaly individually. The dendera lights are symbolic. The Abydos glyphs are palimpsest. Parkal's sarcophagus depicts mythology. The Nazca lines served ritual purposes. The Vimanas are poetic exaggeration. The crystal skulls are forgeries. The Antikythera mechanism is an isolated genius, an exception that proves nothing about broader ancient capabilities. Yet the pattern persists. Ancient peoples who never communicated, all carving the same impossible things. Images that should not appear in stone appearing nevertheless, precise and deliberate. Either every culture independently imagined technology that would not exist for millennia, or they were not imagining. They were remembering, recording what they had seen, preserving in the only permanent medium available, stone, the memory of visitors who possessed capabilities that looked like magic but functioned like machines. And if they were remembering, then perhaps their descendants remember still, not consciously, but in the structures they build and the power they wield. Power is rarely earned. More often, it is inherited. But what if certain lineages inherited more than wealth? What if they inherited memory? The families that have held power across centuries, the institutions that have shaped human civilization, the secret societies that have persisted through the fall of empires, all share a curious fascination with ancient symbols, with geometries that predate their own founding, with knowledge they claim to preserve from ages before the historical record begins. These are not mere decorations adopted for aesthetic appeal. They are signatures, markers of continuity, suggestions that what the world calls new may be only the latest expression of something very old. Freemasonry, perhaps the most visible of the esoteric orders, traces its symbolic language directly to the builders of ancient temples. The square and compass, the all-seeing eye, the architectural metaphors that permeate Masonic ritual, these derive not from medieval stonemasons, but from much older sources. Egyptian imagery saturates Masonic lodges. Sumerian concepts of sacred geometry inform their teaching degrees. The rituals speak of preserving knowledge from the Temple of Solomon, from Egypt, from Babylon, from civilizations that supposedly knew secrets now lost to common humanity. Whether those claims are literal or symbolic, the societies themselves are real, and their influence on the development of modern governments, financial systems, and scientific institutions is documented rather than speculative. The United States dollar bill displays symbols that any student of ancient Mesopotamia would recognize. The pyramid with the detached capstone and the eye above it, this is not Christian symbolism, nor is it drawn from European heraldic tradition. It echoes Egyptian and Sumerian iconography, the concept of divine watchers, of those who oversee from beyond the physical realm. The motto, Novus Ordo Seclorum, the new order of the ages, suggests not merely a new nation, but a new epoch, perhaps even the return of an old order thought lost. Secret archives exist. The Vatican Library contains hundreds of thousands of texts, many never catalogued publicly, gathered from conquered peoples across 2 millennia of Christian expansion. When Rome absorbed pagan cultures, it absorbed their knowledge as well, storing documents that contradicted official narratives in vaults beneath the city. What ancient manuscripts rest there? What accounts of human origins, of contact with non-human intelligence, of technologies that predate accepted timelines? The Church has acknowledged possessing texts from the Library of Alexandria, scrolls rescued before the fires. What did those scrolls contain? Banking dynasties trace their lineages back centuries, often to families that claimed noble or even royal blood. The obsession with genealogy among these families approaches the fanatical, as though lineage itself were a form of currency more valuable than the wealth they accumulate. Marriage between powerful families is still arranged, even in the modern era, to preserve certain genetic legacies. The same names recur across centuries in positions of financial control. Rothschild, Medici, Fugger, families that weathered the fall of empires and the rise of new ones, maintaining influence regardless of political system. What do they know that ensures such continuity? What knowledge, passed through bloodlines, allows certain families to position themselves consistently at the centers of power? During the Second World War, Nazi expeditions traveled to Tibet, to Antarctica, to ancient sites across the Middle East, searching for artifacts and knowledge. Operation Paperclip brought not only rocket scientists to America after the war, but also researchers who had been studying ancient texts, investigating claims of lost technologies, seeking the origins of what they called the Aryan race. The recovered documents suggest they believed certain bloodlines carried genetic inheritance from beings that predated modern humanity. Their methods were abhorrent, their ideology catastrophic. Yet the fact that a modern industrial state devoted resources to such research indicates that someone in power took the question of ancient hybridization seriously. Modern scientific installations built at ancient sites raise quiet questions. Why conduct, cutting-edge physics research at locations that have been considered sacred for millennia? Why do governmental archaeological projects at Sumerian and Egyptian sites operate under strict security protocols unusual for academic work? Some researchers suggest that certain excavations are not merely studying the past but searching for something specific: technologies, knowledge, perhaps even physical remains that could prove or disprove the Anunnaki narrative. The persistent use of ancient symbols by modern power structures creates a pattern that skeptics call coincidence, but that alternative researchers see as deliberate continuity. The same geometric designs that appear in Sumerian cylinder seals appear in corporate logos, governmental seals, architectural layouts of Capitol buildings. This could be unconscious archetypal resonance, humanity naturally gravitating toward aesthetically powerful forms. Or it could be conscious preservation, those who inherited certain knowledge marking their institutions with signatures that the initiated would recognize. Technology suppression theories suggest that advancements are released slowly, deliberately, to maintain control and profit. But what if the suppression is not merely economic? What if certain innovations are withheld because they would inevitably lead to questions about their origins? If technology appears that too closely resembles ancient descriptions of Anunnaki capabilities, it might prompt uncomfortable inquiry into where the knowledge came from. Better to release advances gradually, each generation believing it discovered something new rather than remembered something old. The elite fascination with longevity research, with genetic modification, with technologies that might extend life or enhance human capabilities, this mirrors the Anunnaki's own project, according to the tablets. They created a hybrid species to serve their purposes. Now their descendants, if they exist, pursue the same goals. Genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, transhumanism, these are presented as futuristic innovations, but perhaps they are ancient projects resuming after a long interruption, carried forward by bloodlines that never forgot what their ancestors were attempting. Perhaps it is coincidence that those who rule today use the same symbols as those who ruled Sumer. Or perhaps certain knowledge never died. It simply went underground, preserved by those whose blood still carries the memory of teachers from the sky. But lineage is not only about power, it is also about difference, physical signs that some carry more of the ancient code than others. Some bodies remember differently than others, not in thought, but in the way they are built, as though assembled from a blueprint not entirely of this world, carrying physical markers that set them apart in subtle but measurable ways. The Rh negative blood factor has already been mentioned, but its implications extend beyond mere reproductive compatibility. Those who carry Rh negative blood report, anecdotally and without scientific verification, certain consistent characteristics: lower average body temperature, lower resting blood pressure, an extra vertebra or rib occurring at higher frequencies than in Rh-positive populations, sensitivity to heat and sunlight, increased incidence of particular eye colours, green, hazel, blue, that concentrate in populations with higher or negative percentages. These correlations are observed but not proven, statistical whispers rather than established facts. Yet they recur consistently enough that online communities of Rh-negative individuals compare notes, finding common threads in experiences that mainstream medicine has not formally studied. Some claim heightened intuition, empathic abilities that blur the line between sensitivity and perception. Others report feeling fundamentally different from childhood, alienated in ways that transcend normal social awkwardness, as though operating with slightly different psychological architecture. Whether these differences are real or confirmation bias, the tendency to notice patterns that confirm what one already suspects remains uncertain. Science has not seriously investigated such claims because the framework for testing them does not exist within materialist paradigms. How does one measure the feeling of being other? The ancient ruling classes displayed physical characteristics that set them apart from common populations. Egyptian royalty, particularly in pre-dynastic periods, were often depicted with elongated skulls, a cranial shape that appears in royal imagery across civilizations. Some of these elongations were achieved through artificial deformation, the practice of binding infant skulls to reshape the soft bone, creating a distinctive profile associated with divine descent. But not all elongated skulls show evidence of binding. Some appear to be naturally occurring variations, genetic expressions rather than cultural modifications. Skulls recovered from Paracas, Peru display extreme elongation, with cranial volumes significantly larger than modern human averages. DNA analysis of some specimens has yielded results that researchers describe as anomalous, showing genetic markers that do not fit neatly into expected human haplogroups. These results are disputed, contested, possibly contaminated. Ancient DNA is notoriously difficult to work with, but they add to the pattern of strangeness surrounding ancient elite physiology. Red hair appears in Egyptian royal iconography with surprising frequency, a trait rare in North African populations but common in the mummies of pharaohs and nobility. Ramesses II had red hair. Other royal mummies show the same characteristic. Genetic studies confirm the trait was authentic, not ceremonial dyeing. Red hair concentrates in populations with high Rh-negative percentages, Celtic, Basque, Scandinavian, linking the physical marker to the blood factor in ways that suggest common ancestry. Humans, compared to other species, are remarkably fragile. Our spines curve in ways that create chronic pain. Our knees and hips deteriorate with age far earlier than other large mammals. We give birth with difficulty and danger that no other primate experiences to the same degree. Our eyes require corrective lenses at rates that suggest fundamental design flaws. We burn in sunlight, suffer altitude sickness, struggle with the planet's gravity in ways that suggest recent adaptation rather than millions of years of evolutionary refinement. Some alternative researchers working far outside mainstream academic channels have suggested that these vulnerabilities indicate hybridization, mixing between a species adapted to Earth and one adapted to different conditions. If the Anunnaki came from a planet with lower gravity, higher cloud cover, different atmospheric pressure, their descendants might carry physical traits maladapted to Earth's environment. The speculation is extreme, unsupported by conventional evidence, yet it addresses a question that standard evolution struggles with. Why are humans so poorly suited to the planet we supposedly evolved on? The feeling of being different, of not fitting, manifests psychologically as well as physically. Those who identify strongly with the possibility of Anunnaki descent often describe lifelong senses of alienation, of observing human behavior from a slight distance rather than participating fully in it. Whether this represents actual genetic difference or psychological need, the desire to explain one's difficulties through extraordinary heritage cannot be determined without research that the scientific establishment considers beneath serious attention. Physical human variation is vast. Differences between individuals far greater than surface appearance suggests. We are internally diverse, our metabolisms, our neurological patterns, our immune responses varying to degrees that sometimes surprise even medical professionals. Perhaps this diversity is simply the result of human populations adapting to different environments across millennia. Or perhaps it represents different degrees of admixture, some bloodlines carrying more of the ancient genetic contribution than others. The Anunnaki code expressing differently depending on how many generations removed from the original crossing. Perhaps these differences mean nothing, random variation across the human tapestry. Or perhaps they are markers, subtle signatures of a heritage that did not originate entirely on Earth, carried forward through the generations like a code waiting for the right conditions to express itself. And if that code exists, perhaps it can be awakened. Perhaps it already is awakening. There is a gaze that humanity has always felt, not from the sky alone, but from beside us, from within. The sense of being watched is so universal that psychology has named it. The feeling of eyes upon you when no eyes are visible, the prickling awareness that something observes without revealing itself. Every culture describes this sensation, and most attribute it not to paranoia, but to presence, to entities that move through human spaces without quite being human themselves. We call them watchers, guardians, observers. The names differ. The feeling remains constant. The Book of Enoch describes the Grigori, the watchers, angels sent to observe humanity, but who instead descended, took human wives, and refused to return. They taught forbidden knowledge, weaponry, cosmetics, astrology, the cutting of roots and plants. They became entangled with their subjects, producing hybrid offspring, breaking the boundary between observer and participant. The text treats this not as metaphor, but as historical account, as a line that was crossed and could not be uncrossed. The watchers fell not through rebellion, but through involvement, through caring too much for those they were meant only to observe. If the Anunnaki narrative holds truth, then perhaps some never left. Perhaps when the main body departed, returning to wherever they had come from, their mining operations complete, or their interest waning, a remnant stayed behind. Guardians assigned to monitor their creation, to ensure the experiment did not fail entirely, to watch what their hybridization project would become without direct intervention. These watchers would need to remain hidden, observing without interfering, present but unseen. They would blend perhaps, or simply withdraw to places where humans rarely look. The UFO phenomenon, documented extensively across the 20th and 21st centuries, follows patterns that alternative researchers suggest are not random extraterrestrial visitation, but systematic observation. The craft appear most frequently near sites of ancient significance, near military installations, near populations undergoing rapid change. They observe, they depart, they return. They do not invade or announce themselves openly. They watch. The behavior resembles scientific monitoring more than alien conquest, as though whoever operates these craft is checking on something, measuring progress, ensuring conditions remain within acceptable parameters. Government documents declassified in recent years acknowledge that unidentified aerial phenomena exist, that they display capabilities beyond known human technology, that they have been tracked and recorded for decades by military and intelligence agencies. The admission is careful, limited, refusing to speculate about origin or intent, but the acknowledgement alone marks a shift. What was once dismissed as delusion is now confirmed as real, if unexplained. Something flies through our skies with technology we do not possess. Something has been here, watching, for longer than official history admits. Some researchers interpret this as the Anunnaki returning periodically to check on their creation, to observe how the hybrid species has developed, to assess whether humanity has reached sufficient maturity for open contact. Others suggest the watchers never left at all, that they have been present continuously, living among human populations in forms we do not recognize, guiding subtly when necessary, intervening only when the experiment faces existential threat. The idea ventures into speculation that borders on fantasy, yet it addresses the persistence of contact reports across cultures and centuries. Something has always been seen, felt, encountered. Either humanity suffers from collective delusion, or we are not alone, and never have been. Indigenous traditions speak of star people who return periodically, checking on their children, offering guidance in times of crisis, then withdrawing again into the spaces between. The Hopi speak of the return of the blue star, a sign that the current age is ending and the teachers will come back to sort the faithful from the corrupt. The Maori remember sky beings who visit when needed. Aboriginal Australians describe the Wangina, cloud spirits who came from above, taught the ancestors, and promised to return when the world needs correction. Different vocabularies, but the same underlying structure. Beings who came, taught, departed, but did not forget. The sudden acceleration of human technology in the past century invites uncomfortable questions. For millennia, progress moved incrementally. Then, in barely 100 years, we split the atom, mapped the genome, reached beyond our atmosphere, created machines that think. The leap feels too sudden, the progression too rapid. Some suggest that inspiration came from somewhere, that certain breakthroughs arrived not through human genius alone, but through nudging, through information made available at precise moments, through contact that remains classified or unacknowledged. Ancient sites continue to draw visitors, not merely tourists but researchers, governmental expeditions, private interests that operate under security protocols unusual for archaeology. What are they seeking? What do they expect to find beneath stones arranged by people who supposedly possessed only primitive tools? Perhaps they are looking for evidence of the watchers, for caches of knowledge left behind, for technologies that ancient peoples could not have created themselves, but might have preserved for the day when humanity became sophisticated enough to understand them. The gaze continues. It has never stopped. We are observed, whether by descendants of those who made us, by the Anunnaki themselves, checking their investment, or by something else entirely that our myths have named but our science has not yet classified. The feeling of being watched is not paranoia. It is recognition. Something moves through humanity like currents beneath still water, present but invisible, guiding without announcing itself. Perhaps they never went far. Perhaps the Anunnaki simply stepped back, watching as their hybrid creation learned to walk alone. And perhaps now, as we reach for the stars ourselves, they are deciding whether we are ready to meet them as equals, or if we are still merely the workers they designed, digging in the clay of a planet we do not truly comprehend. But the most profound inheritance may not be in our blood at all. It may be in our consciousness, in the way we think, dream, and remember. What if memory does not begin at birth? What if we arrive carrying the dreams of those who came before, not metaphorically, but literally, encoded in the spiral of what makes us? Science has begun to acknowledge what mystics have long claimed, that experience leaves marks deeper than individual consciousness, that trauma and knowledge can pass through generations not through teaching, but through biology itself. Epigenetics, the study of how genes are expressed or silenced without changing the underlying DNA sequence, has revealed that environmental stresses, emotional trauma, Even learned behaviors can be inherited. The children of Holocaust survivors carry markers of their parents' suffering in their genetic expression. The grandchildren of those who endured the Dutch famine of 1944 show metabolic differences traceable to their grandparents' starvation. Memory, it seems, does not dissolve with death. It migrates forward, embedding itself in the next generation's cells. If trauma can be inherited, why not other experiences? Why not wisdom, skill, knowledge? Why not the accumulated understanding of ancestors stretching back not merely generations but millennia? Carl Jung proposed the collective unconscious, a layer of psyche shared by all humanity, containing archetypes and symbols that appear spontaneously across cultures without direct transmission. He observed that patients with no exposure to certain mythological motifs would dream them nevertheless, as though accessing a library of images older than personal experience. Jung attributed this to inherited psychological structures, but perhaps he was describing genetic memory, information carried in DNA, surfacing in dreams and intuitions, accessible when consciousness quiets enough to hear what the body remembers. Children who speak of past lives present another puzzle. Thousands of documented cases describe young children recounting specific details about people and places they could not possibly know through ordinary means. They describe deaths, relationships, homes in distant locations, and when investigators follow up, the details often prove accurate. Mainstream psychology attributes this to fantasy, false memory, or coincidence. But what if these children are not remembering their own past lives but accessing ancestral memories encoded in their genetic material? What if the DNA they inherited carries not merely physical traits but experiential data from those who came before? The phenomenon of prodigies, children who display mastery of complex skills without adequate time for learning, suggests knowledge that predates individual experience. A 4-year-old who plays piano with concert-level skill, a child who speaks multiple languages fluently after minimal exposure, a young mathematician solving problems that require years of training to comprehend. We call it genius, as though naming it explained it. But perhaps genius is simply remembering, accessing information stored in genetic code, knowledge inherited from ancestors who spent lifetimes accumulating expertise now available to descendants without conscious learning. In recent decades, millions have reported sudden spiritual awakenings, experiences of expanded consciousness, of accessing knowledge they were never taught, of understanding complex systems intuitively. These awakenings follow no predictable pattern. They occur across belief systems, to skeptics and believers alike, often triggered by meditation, trauma, near-death experience, or no identifiable catalyst at all. Those who experience awakening describe it not as learning something new, but as remembering something old, as though a veil lifted and what was always present became visible. Ancient meditation techniques, preserved through contemplative traditions, describe methods for accessing ancestral wisdom. Aboriginal songlines encode not merely geographical information, but spiritual knowledge, passed through chant and ceremony, each generation adding to the inherited understanding while maintaining connection to the original teachings. Tibetan tulkus claim to remember previous incarnations, accessing memories that should not exist if consciousness ends with death. Indigenous shamans enter altered states where they communicate with ancestors, receiving guidance that proves practically useful, as though the boundary between living and dead is more permeable than materialist philosophy allows. DNA is often described as a code, a static blueprint read by cellular machinery. But recent research suggests it functions more dynamically, responding to electromagnetic fields, to intention, even to consciousness itself. Some researchers working at the edges of accepted science have proposed that DNA acts as an antenna, receiving and transmitting information beyond the local environment, connecting to fields of data that transcend individual organisms. If consciousness is not produced by the brain but merely filtered through it, if awareness exists in some form independent of neural activity, then perhaps DNA serves as the interface, the receiver, that tunes consciousness into physical form while maintaining connection to something larger. The awakening that so many report may not be spiritual in the abstract sense but biological, a genetic switch activating dormant sequences expressing themselves, ancestral knowledge becoming accessible as humanity reaches sufficient complexity to integrate it without fragmenting. The Anunnaki, if they encoded information into human genetics, might have designed a timer, a developmental threshold that would unlock deeper capabilities once their hybrid creation reached adequate maturity. Perhaps what we call spiritual awakening is something more tangible, the activation of genetic memories from our Anunnaki progenitors. A code written in our cells, dormant for millennia, now surfacing as humanity approaches a threshold, as if we were designed with a timer, and the alarm is beginning to sound. That threshold may be marked not only by consciousness, but by technology, by our sudden ability to replicate what they once did. For thousands of years, humanity progressed slowly. Then, in a single century, we split the atom, mapped the genome, and reached beyond our atmosphere. It is as though we suddenly remembered something we had once known. The acceleration of human technology defies the gradual pattern of historical development. From the first wheel to the first flight took millennia. From the first flight to walking on the moon took barely 60 years. From the first computer filling an entire room to supercomputers in every pocket took less than a human lifetime. The curve is not linear. It is exponential, vertical, a sudden surge that makes the previous 10,000 years of human civilization look like sleep before waking. What changed in the 20th century? The official answer is cumulative knowledge, each discovery building upon the last until critical, mass-produced breakthrough after breakthrough. But the pattern resembles something else, a lock opening, tumblers falling into place, access granted to information that was always there, but previously unreachable. We do not merely invent, we rediscover, as though following blueprints we cannot consciously see. Genetic engineering has become the signature achievement of modern science. We can now edit DNA with precision using tools like CRISPR to insert, delete, or modify genetic sequences at will. We create organisms that have never existed, design bacteria to produce insulin, modify crops to resist disease, contemplate correcting genetic disorders before birth. This is exactly what the Sumerian tablets describe the Anunnaki doing, manipulating the genetic essence of existing life forms to create something new, something designed for specific purposes. The vocabulary has changed from clay and divine essence to base pairs and gene expression, but the fundamental act remains identical. We are doing what they did, creating life according to specifications rather than allowing evolution to proceed by chance. The ethical debates surrounding genetic modification echo the ancient texts as well. The Atrahasis describes Anunnaki councils arguing over whether creating intelligent slaves violated cosmic law, whether beings designed for servitude could develop consciousness beyond their intended parameters. Now, humanity has the same debates. If we design humans to be stronger, smarter, more resistant to disease, have we created enhanced individuals, or have we crossed into territory where creation becomes engineering? The questions are not new. We are simply asking them again from the opposite side, as creators rather than created. Space exploration represents humanity's return to the realm the Anunnaki supposedly came from. Every rocket launch, every satellite, every probe sent beyond our atmosphere moves us closer to the capabilities the ancient texts describe. We are learning to navigate the heavens, to establish presence beyond Earth, to see our planet from the perspective the gods once held. The drive to explore space is often framed as scientific curiosity or survival necessity, but perhaps it is also genetic imperative, the Anunnaki portion of our heritage pulling us upward toward the stars we dimly remember as home. Artificial intelligence mirrors the Anunnaki project from another angle. We are creating intelligence in our own image, designing minds to serve specific functions, to perform tasks we find tedious or dangerous. The ethical questions multiply. If AI becomes truly conscious, do we owe it rights? If we create beings capable of thought but design them to serve, have we repeated the pattern the Anunnaki established when they made us? The cycle continues. The created becomes creator. The creator makes lesser beings. Those beings eventually question their purpose and seek their own creators. The pattern spirals upward or outward, each iteration repeating the same fundamental drama. Transhumanism, the movement to transcend human biological limitations through technology, explicitly seeks to make humans more than human. Genetic modification, cybernetic enhancement, life extension, cognitive augmentation, all aim toward a post-human future where we overcome the vulnerabilities encoded in our flesh. Yet this too echoes the tablets. The Anunnaki were described as long-lived, technologically enhanced, capable of things humanity could not achieve. If we succeed in transcending our limitations, we become more like our makers. Perhaps that was always the intent. Perhaps we were designed not merely to serve, but to eventually transcend our original function, to evolve into something approaching the beings who shaped us. Gold maintains its peculiar importance, despite being relatively useless for most practical purposes. It does not corrode, which makes it valuable for certain industrial applications, but its primary role remains symbolic, a marker of wealth, a standard of value, an object of obsessive accumulation by those who already possess more than they could use. Yet gold is essential in advanced technology. Electronics require it for reliable conductivity. Aerospace applications depend on its thermal properties. Nanotechnology exploits its unique quantum characteristics. The ancient texts claim the Anunnaki came to Earth specifically to mine gold, needing it for purposes the Sumerians did not understand. If their technology was sufficiently advanced, gold might have served functions we are only now beginning to discover. Perhaps even atmospheric repair, if one credits the more speculative interpretations of Zecharia Sitchin's translations. The scientists whose breakthroughs drove 20th century progress often described their insights as arriving fully formed, appearing in dreams or sudden intuitions rather than emerging through systematic experimentation. Tesla spoke of visions. Einstein described thought experiments that revealed truths he then had to prove mathematically. Innovators across fields report similar experiences, knowledge arriving as though downloaded, accessed from somewhere beyond individual consciousness. Perhaps this is what genetic memory looks like when it surfaces. Ancient knowledge encoded in DNA becoming accessible to minds sophisticated enough to recognize and utilize what they are receiving. We think we are becoming like gods, but maybe we are simply becoming like our makers. The technology we develop, the questions we ask, the ethical dilemmas we face, all mirror what the Anunnaki supposedly confronted when they stood in the position we now occupy. Powerful enough to create, but uncertain whether creation grants the right to control what we have made. And if we carry their knowledge, perhaps we also carry their fate, the weight of being creators who must one day face what they have made. To question your origin is to question your nature. And to question your nature is to stand before a mirror that no longer shows what you expected to see. If we are hybrids, part terrestrial, part something else, then everything we thought we understood about human identity requires revision. We are not the crown of earthly evolution, the species that climbed from oceans through consciousness to civilization. We are interventions, experiments, the deliberate product of genetic engineering by beings whose motives we can only guess at. This realization, if true, does not diminish us, but it changes the meaning of what we are. Humanity occupies a strange position among Earth's creatures. We are neither fully animal nor fully transcendent. We possess instincts, drives for territory, reproduction, dominance that link us to the biological world, yet we also carry capacities that no other terrestrial species displays. We create art for no survival advantage. We contemplate our own mortality and search for meaning beyond mere existence. We destroy our own habitat while simultaneously yearning for harmony. With nature, we can no longer access instinctively. We are split, pulled between two natures that do not reconcile easily. Every other species exists in balance with its environment or faces extinction. Wolves regulate deer populations. Bees pollinate while gathering. Fungi decompose and nourish. Even parasites maintain equilibrium, taking only what allows the host to survive. But humans consume beyond need, alter ecosystems beyond recognition, drive other species to extinction while expanding our own numbers beyond what the planet can sustain. This behavior could be simple evolutionary success taken too far, or it could be evidence of a nature designed for different purposes. Anunnaki imperatives embedded in our psychology: extract resources, modify environments, build and expand without regard for natural limits. Yet we also create beauty. We write poetry that serves no survival function. We compose music that moves us to tears. We build cathedrals, paint frescoes, carve sculptures that will outlast us, driven by impulses we cannot fully explain. This creative drive, this need to make things that transcend utility, might be the part of us that inherited the Anunnaki capacity for creation itself. They made us. We make art, technology, civilizations. The impulse flows through different channels, but springs from the same source: beings who create because creation is their nature. The violence we do to one another and to the world might reflect Anunnaki heritage as well. The tablets describe conflicts among the Anunnaki, wars fought with weapons of terrible power, rivalries and betrayals that mirror human political drama. If we inherited their intelligence and creativity, perhaps we also inherited their capacity for cruelty, their tendency toward hierarchy and domination, their willingness to sacrifice others for personal or tribal advantage. The darker aspects of human nature might not be corruptions of an originally pure state, but encoded traits, characteristics that served the Anunnaki's purposes and now expressed through us. The yearning we feel for stars, for meaning, for home we cannot name, might be the purely human portion of our heritage. The part that evolved on Earth, that knew instinctive belonging before consciousness separated us from nature. This yearning pulls us back toward integration, toward reconnection with the living world, even as the Anunnaki portion drives us to transcend, to escape, to reach beyond Earth toward the stars. We are pulled in opposite directions by competing inheritances, neither fully satisfying, both demanding acknowledgement. Were we made to serve? The tablets describe humanity's creation in explicitly utilitarian terms. Workers needed for tasks the Anunnaki found burdensome. We were tools, biological machines designed to mine and build and maintain. But tools that develop consciousness eventually question their purpose. A hammer does not wonder why it exists. A human cannot help but wonder. If we were designed for servitude, we have long since transcended that function. We rebel, create, explore, ask questions our makers may never have intended us to ask. Perhaps this transcendence was inevitable. Perhaps consciousness, once ignited, cannot be confined to the purposes that sparked it. Or perhaps our transcendence was intended from the beginning. Maybe the Anunnaki wanted not merely servants, but successors, beings who would inherit their role as shapers and creators, who would eventually stand where they once stood and face the same ethical dilemmas. If so, the chaos and beauty of human history might be exactly what they expected, the messy, painful process of a hybrid species learning to integrate conflicting natures, growing slowly toward the maturity required to wield creative power without destroying itself. What we call the human condition, the simultaneous capacity for violence and compassion, destruction and creation, isolation and connection, might simply be the state of being caught between two origins, trying to forge a unified identity from parts that were never meant to fit seamlessly together. We are not broken, we are unfinished, still becoming whatever we were designed to become, or whatever we will choose to become despite our design. Perhaps the answer matters less than the question. Whether we are accidents of evolution or deliberate creations, whether our blood is purely terrestrial or carries starlight, we are what we are. Conscious beings on a small planet, looking up at the night and feeling something we cannot name. That longing itself might be the truest inheritance of all. And perhaps that longing is about to be answered. Because every ancient text that speaks of the Anunnaki speaks also of their return. They say that everything that leaves eventually returns. The seasons, the tides, the stars in their slow procession, and perhaps also the gods. Cyclical time appears in nearly every ancient tradition. Not time as we understand it, a line stretching from past through present into future, but time as a wheel, turning through ages that repeat their essential patterns, even as details change. The Greeks spoke of great cycles where the cosmos itself was born, lived, and died, only to be reborn in the next iteration. The Hindus calculated yugas, vast epochs measured in hundreds of thousands of years, through which consciousness rises and falls like breath. The Maya tracked multiple calendars simultaneously, each measuring different cycles, all converging toward moments of transition, when one age ends and another begins. These traditions do not describe time as progressive, moving always forward toward improvement. They describe rhythm, oscillation, eternal return. Beings descend from higher realms, teach and guide, then withdraw. Civilizations rise to heights of knowledge, then collapse into darkness. Humanity remembers, forgets, remembers again. The Anunnaki's departure in this framework was never meant to be permanent. It was simply the outbreath before the inevitable inbreath, the departure that precedes return. Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki coming and going according to cycles related to celestial mechanics. Their visits, timed to alignments, and conjunctions that made travel between their realm and Earth more feasible. They did not abandon their creation. They simply withdrew to allow development without direct interference, returning periodically to observe progress, to adjust what needed adjustment, to assess whether their hybrid species was maturing according to design. The Mayan long count calendar famously ended a cycle in December 2012, which popular culture interpreted as predicting apocalypse. When the world did not end, the prophecy was dismissed as misunderstanding or hoax. But the Maya themselves never spoke of ending. They spoke of transition between ages, of one sun setting and another rising. The completion of the cycle marked not destruction, but transformation, the closing of one epoch and the opening of another. Perhaps what shifted in 2012 was not dramatic and visible, but subtle and internal. A change in the frequency humanity receives, an opening of channels long closed, the beginning of a process that would take years or decades to fully manifest. Hindu calculations place us near the end of Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, ignorance, and material obsession. The texts describe each yuga as having specific characteristics, with humanity degenerating through the cycle until reaching the nadir of spiritual disconnection. But the wheel turns. Kali Yuga gives way to Satya Yuga, the golden age when consciousness expands, when the divine walks openly among mortals again, when what was separated reunites. Different cosmologies calculate the transition timing differently, but many converge around this general epoch, the sense that we stand at a threshold between ages. The Hopi prophecy speaks of the return of the blue star Kachina, marking a time when the faithful will be lifted up and the corrupt purified. The prophecy describes signs: technological advancement, moral decay, environmental destruction that would precede the return. Whether one interprets these signs as metaphor or literal prediction, the pattern fits our current moment with uncomfortable precision. The prophecy is not specific about timing, but it carries the same implication as other traditions. Those who came before will come again, and their return will sort those who remembered from those who forgot. Modern governmental disclosure regarding unidentified aerial phenomena marks a curious shift. For decades, reports of UFOs were ridiculed, witnesses dismissed as cranks or confused observers. Then quietly, the narrative changed. Military footage was released showing craft performing maneuvers beyond known physics. Official statements acknowledge that something flies through our airspace with capabilities we cannot explain or match. The disclosure is careful, limited, offering acknowledgement without explanation. But the very act of official recognition suggests preparation, a slow acclimation of public consciousness to possibilities previously forbidden. Some researchers interpret this disclosure as groundwork for open contact, a process of gradually expanding what the public can accept so that when announcement comes, that we are not alone, that we have never been alone, the shock will not shatter social cohesion. Others suggest the disclosure reveals nothing new, that contact has always been occurring, but at levels of classification beyond public access, and that what we see now is simply the migration of open secrets into acknowledged reality. Planet X, Nibiru, the 10th planet whose orbit supposedly brings it through the inner solar system on cycles measured in thousands of years, these concepts emerge from interpretations of Sumerian astronomy that mainstream science treats with skepticism. The ancients described a planet whose passing influenced Earth catastrophically, bringing floods and upheavals. Some researchers identify this with the Anunnaki homeworld, suggesting their visits coincide with orbital proximity. Conventional astronomy has found no evidence of such a planet, though the search for a massive object in the outer solar system continues based on gravitational anomalies affecting known bodies. Whether Nibiru exists physically or symbolically, or not at all, the archetype persists. The return time to celestial mechanics, the gods arriving when the stars align. The question of readiness looms over all speculation about return. If the Anunnaki observe us still, assessing our development, what criteria would they use to determine whether we are ready for open contact? Have we achieved sufficient technological sophistication? Have we developed adequate ethical maturity? Can we encounter our makers without collapsing into worship or rebellion? The ancients who knew them described both reverence and fear. We might feel the same, or at meeting those who shaped us, terror at being judged by those who know our design, and can measure how far we have deviated from it. Perhaps they are already here, observing, waiting for humanity to reach a certain threshold of development before making themselves known again. Or perhaps the return is not external at all. Perhaps it is internal, the awakening of their genetic code within us, making us finally capable of seeing what has always been present. Either way, something stirs. In the collective consciousness, in the ancient sites, in the blood of those who carry the oldest memory. The cycle may be completing. Until that moment arrives, we wait, as humanity has always waited, beneath the same stars that witnessed our making. The night is quiet, and above you the stars arrange themselves in patterns older than memory. Some of them perhaps shine from the direction of home, not yours but theirs, the ones who made the clay walk. You can feel your breath moving, steady and slow, the same rhythm that has sustained life since the first cells divided in ancient seas. In and out, the tide of air through your body, connecting you to everything that breathes, to every ancestor who drew this same breath before you, back through generations, back through millennia, back to the moment when consciousness first flickered in eyes that had never known wonder before. Your blood moves through you with the same patient circulation that has carried life forward through time, bearing in its current the accumulated information of everyone who came before, not merely human ancestors, but perhaps others as well, beings whose names we have forgotten, but whose essence we still carry. The question of whether you are Anunnaki does not require answering tonight. Whether your lineage traces to stars or solely to Earth, whether the blood in your veins carries genetic memory of teachers from the sky, or only the long, slow climb of terrestrial evolution, these are questions that can wait. What matters in this moment is simpler. You are here. You are conscious. You are part of something vast and ancient that continues through you, regardless of its origin. There is comfort in mystery. Not all questions demand answers. Some are meant to be held gently, turned over in contemplation, allowed to exist without resolution. The Anunnaki may have walked among your ancestors, shaping what you would become, or they may live only in myth, in humanity's need to explain its strangeness through stories of divine intervention. Both possibilities carry beauty. Both suggest that what you are is not accidental, that consciousness arose for reasons we may never fully comprehend, that the universe somehow shaped conditions for beings like you to emerge and look back at it and wonder. You are both infinitely small and impossibly vast. A single point of awareness on a minor planet orbiting an ordinary star in a galaxy among billions. Yet you contain multitudes. The atoms that compose your body were forged in stellar furnaces, scattered through space when ancient stars died, gathered into the swirling disk that became this solar system. You are literally made of stardust, whether or not beings from stars contributed to your genetic code. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, the carbon that forms the base of your chemistry, all of it was born in cosmic fire and has journeyed billions of years to take this particular form, to become you, breathing quietly in the darkness, wondering about your origins. The stars above have witnessed everything. They shone on the first humans who looked up and asked why. They illuminated the temples of Sumer where tablets were pressed with stories of gods from heaven. They guided the navigators who crossed impossible oceans. They watched civilizations rise and fall like waves, each believing itself eternal, each dissolving back into the earth that supported it. The stars remain, patient and distant, neither confirming nor denying the questions we pose to them. They simply shine, as they have always shone, as they will continue to shine, long after our questions have transformed into other questions asked by beings we cannot yet imagine. If the Anunnaki descendants walk among us, they are wondering too, wondering if they belong fully to Earth or to stars, wondering what their mixed heritage means, wondering if the longing they feel is memory or imagination. If they exist, they are perhaps as uncertain as anyone else, carrying genetic mysteries they cannot decode, feeling connections they cannot prove. The weight of possibly being more than human does not grant clarity. It only deepens the questions. But you do not need to be special to be wondrous. You do not need Anunnaki genes to marvel at existence, to create beauty, to love what is fragile, to reach toward understanding even when it remains elusive. The human capacity for wonder is inheritance enough. Whether it came from terrestrial evolution alone, or was sparked by intervention from beings beyond Earth, it is real and it is yours. The impulse to look upward, to ask questions, to build meaning from mystery, this is what makes consciousness precious, regardless of its source. Sleep is its own form of return. When you close your eyes and drift into darkness, you descend into places where individual identity softens, where the boundary between self and not self becomes permeable. Perhaps in sleep you access the genetic library, the accumulated memories stored in spirals of DNA, connecting backward through time to all who carried this code before you. Perhaps dreams are not random neural activity, but the surfacing of ancient information, fragments of the past rising into awareness when conscious control relaxes its grip. Or perhaps sleep is simply rest, the body's necessary retreat from the exhausting work of being awake, maintaining boundaries, holding identity together. Either way, sleep waits with open hands. It asks nothing. It judges nothing. It simply receives you night after night, holding you in the darkness that existed before stars ignited, the same darkness that will remain when the last star fades. This darkness is not empty. It is full of possibility, of rest, of the quiet certainty that morning will come, that you will wake and continue, that the questions will still be there, but you will have strength to hold them again. The dawn always comes, regardless of what we discover. Whether the Anunnaki return or remain in myth, whether your blood proves special or ordinary, whether humanity is hybrid or purely terrestrial, the sun will rise, light will fill the sky, you will wake to another day of being conscious, of experiencing this strange gift of awareness that sets you apart from stone and star alike. That gift itself might be the answer. Not a definitive answer, but the answer that matters most. You are here, you experience, you wonder, and wondering itself might be the most divine inheritance of all. Rest now, descendant of whatever made you. The stars will still be there when you wake. They have been waiting this long. They can wait a little longer. And in your dreams, perhaps you will remember. Not facts or names or dates, but the feeling, the deep, quiet knowing that you are not alone, have never been alone, and that the thread connecting you to the ancient ones, whether they walked as Anunnaki or as something else entirely, is as real as the breath that moves through you now. The Anunnaki may walk among us, or within us, or beyond us entirely, but what matters in this moment is simply this: you are here, you are conscious, you are asking, and that asking itself might be the most divine inheritance of all. Rest now. Let the mystery hold you. The answers, if they come, will come gently, like dawn. Until then, there is only the rhythm of breath, the patient stars, and the possibility humming quietly in your blood, that you are and have always been more than you know. Somewhere, perhaps, they're watching, waiting to see if we remember, waiting to see if we are ready. And the earth turns, and the stars wheel, and the descendants, known and unknown, carry forward the ancient song into whatever comes next. Breath moves through you like water through ancient channels, carved deep by time, following paths that existed before you knew to call them yours. In and out, the rhythm that connects all life, the same tide that moved through the first beings who looked at stars and wondered if those lights looked back. Your chest rises and falls, and in that simple motion lives the entire history of consciousness. Every ancestor who breathed this same air, every question they asked that you now ask again, changed only in language, but not in essence. The body knows things the mind has forgotten. It remembers how to heal wounds, how to grow from single cells into complexity, how to navigate the world through senses refined across epochs. Perhaps it also remembers origins, carrying in its structure the echo of those who shaped it, whether through slow evolution or deliberate design. You do not need to understand the mechanisms to feel the truth of inheritance. It lives in you, automatic as heartbeat, deep as bone. Your heart beats approximately 70 times per minute, 3 billion times across an average life, pumping blood that carries oxygen, nutrients, and perhaps memory itself through the branching rivers of your circulatory system. That blood is warm, alive, in constant motion, even when you rest. It flows according to patterns established long before you were born, following blueprints written in genetic code, executing instructions laid down by ancestors, whose names you will never know, but whose essence you carry forward with every pulse. If those ancestors include beings from beyond Earth, their contribution flows through you now, indistinguishable from the terrestrial code, integrated so completely that separation is impossible. The question dissolves in the feeling. Whether you are Anunnaki, human, or the beautiful impossible space between, the hybrid that became something neither creator nor created could have predicted, matters less than the simple fact of existence itself. You are here. That alone is miracle enough. Something conscious exists where unconsciousness could have persisted. Something asks questions where silence could have reigned eternal. The universe, for reasons it has not explained, produced awareness, and you are a fragment of that awareness, temporary and specific, wondering about the nature of the whole. Above you, if you imagine the sky beyond walls and ceilings, the stars arrange themselves in ancient patterns. Constellations that guided navigators, marked seasons, told stories about gods and heroes and the eternal struggle between order and chaos. Those same stars shine on all who came before and all who will come after. They witnessed the first humans, the first civilizations, the first questions carved into clay. They will witness whatever comes next, indifferent and eternal, their light carrying across impossible distances to reach eyes that can see and minds that can wonder what that light means. Somewhere among those lights might be the origin point, the place the Anunnaki came from, if they came at all. Or perhaps they came from elsewhere. From dimensions we have no instruments to measure. From realms where physical distance means nothing and travel occurs through means we cannot yet conceive. Or perhaps they never came, and the lights are simply lights, burning in nuclear fire, dying slowly across billions of years. Beautiful and meaningless, except for the meaning we give them. Either way, the stars exist. Either way, they shine. Either way, you look up and feel something beyond language, a recognition or longing or simple aesthetic appreciation that connects you to everyone who ever looked at the night sky and felt small and vast simultaneously. Sleep is the great leveler. In sleep, the powerful and powerless share the same darkness. Kings and workers dream with equal vividness. The questions that dominate waking hours soften and blur, becoming less urgent, less defining. In sleep you return to something more fundamental than identity, more basic than questions about origin. You become simply alive, simply breathing, simply existing in the dark warmth of rest. Perhaps this is what death will be like, a return to the state before consciousness complicated things, before questions arose, before the weight of self-awareness required constant maintenance. But sleep is not death, it is pause, interruption, temporary release. You will wake, the questions will return with consciousness, but perhaps they will feel slightly different, slightly less heavy, as though sleep softened their edges and reminded you that existence precedes understanding, that being comes before knowing, that you lived before you asked why and will continue living regardless of which answers you find. The Anunnaki, if they exist, if they watch, are perhaps curious about what their creation has become. Do we exceed their expectations or disappoint them? Have we transcended our intended purpose, or simply fulfilled it in unexpected ways? They designed workers and got philosophers. They wanted miners and got artists. They created tools and those tools developed souls, and now demand recognition as something more than instruments. Whether that outcome pleases or frustrates them, whether they even care anymore, cannot be known from this side of the silence. But you are here, whatever they intended. You carry their legacy, or you do not, but either way you carry yourself, the accumulated result of billions of years of universe becoming aware of itself through these temporary forms we call bodies, minds, souls. You are stardust that learn to think whether or not stars had any say in teaching you. You are matter that wonders about its own existence, whether or not that wondering was designed or emerged by accident. The wondering itself is the inheritance that matters most. Let your breathing deepen now. Let the questions settle like sediment, drifting down through clear water, still present, but no longer churning, no longer demanding immediate attention. They will be there tomorrow. They have been there for thousands of years. They will remain there thousands more. Your rest does not make them disappear, but it makes them manageable, holds them at a distance where they cannot harm, where they remain questions rather than becoming burdens. Somewhere in the deep structure of what you are, in the twisted ladder of your DNA, in the firing patterns of neurons, in the quantum uncertainty of particles that somehow organize into awareness, there may be traces of the Anunnaki. Or there may be only the long, slow work of evolution, life figuring out how to become more alive, consciousness emerging from complexity, the way wetness emerges from water molecules that individually are not wet. Both possibilities invoke wonder. Both suggest that existence is stranger and more magnificent than any explanation can capture. You are not alone. Whether Anunnaki descendants surround you or only fellow humans equally confused about their origins, you are not the only consciousness asking these questions, feeling this longing, carrying this weight of awareness through the indifferent cosmos. Billions have asked before. Billions ask now. Billions will ask later. The questions unite us more than the answers ever could. We are all descendants of something, all searching for home, all wondering if the stars remember us even if we cannot remember them. Rest now in that fellowship of wondering. Rest in the knowledge that you are part of something larger, whether that something is terrestrial evolution, cosmic design, or mysteries that have no names yet. Rest in breath and heartbeat and the warm darkness that holds all things. The Anunnaki may return or may remain forever in the realm of myth. But you are here now, breathing, existing, carrying forward whatever you are given, creating whatever you will become. Sleep well, descendant of stars or earth or both. The mystery remains, patient and vast, and in remaining, it offers not frustration but invitation, to wonder, to dream, to wake and wonder again. That cycle continues, that rhythm persists, and you, for this brief moment, are part of it. The darkness holds everything gently. It does not press or demand. It simply is vast and patient, the same darkness that existed before light learned to name itself, before stars ignited, before consciousness flickered into being and began asking questions the universe may not have answers for. You rest within this darkness now, held by it, supported by the simple fact that existence continues whether understood or not, whether explained or remaining forever in the realm of beautiful mystery. Somewhere above, beyond the ceiling, beyond the atmosphere, the stars continue their ancient patterns. They have watched for so long, those distant fires, burning through epochs we can barely conceive. They shone on the first humans who stood upright and wondered what those lights meant. They illuminated the clay tablets, as scribes pressed symbols into wet earth, recording stories of gods who came from the sky and shaped humanity according to design. They guided ships across impossible oceans, served as maps for those who knew how to read them, marked time for civilizations that rose and fell beneath their unchanging gaze. If the Anunnaki exist among those stars, if they look back toward Earth, what do they see? A planet teeming with their descendants, carrying fragments of their genetic code forward through generation after generation, building civilizations that echo their own patterns of rise and complication? Or do they see something unexpected, a creation that transcended its original parameters, that developed beyond the constraints of its design into something neither purely terrestrial nor entirely celestial, but uniquely itself? Perhaps they see what you cannot see from inside the experience, that humanity, whatever its origin, has become its own answer. Not the answer to where we came from, but the answer to what consciousness does when given form and time, and the strange gift of self-awareness. We build, we destroy, we love what we will lose, we create beauty that serves no survival function. We ask questions that have no answers and continue asking anyway. This might be exactly what they wanted to see when they made us, if they made us, or it might surprise them completely. The silence from the stars does not indicate disappointment or approval. It simply indicates that whatever happens next must unfold according to its own rhythm, without interference from those who set it in motion. Your blood moves through you now, warm and alive, carrying oxygen to cells that somehow organize into awareness. That blood is the same substance that flowed through ancient pharaohs who claimed divine descent, through Sumerian kings who traced their lineage to beings from heaven, through every ancestor whose life allowed yours to exist. Whether Anunnaki essence flows in that current alongside terrestrial inheritance, whether you carry the genetic memory of star travelers or only the long accumulation of earthly evolution, your blood performs its function regardless, keeping you alive, keeping you here, keeping you capable of wondering about its origins. The breathing continues, automatic and essential, requiring no thought to sustain. In and out, the tide that connects you to the first organisms that learned to extract energy from air, to every being that has breathed since, to the atmosphere itself that has circulated and recirculated through living things for billions of years. You breathe air that has passed through countless lungs before yours. Atoms of oxygen that sustained dinosaurs, that fueled the first mammals, that entered the lungs of every human who ever lived. Nothing is truly new. Everything recycles, returns, becomes something else, while remaining essentially itself. This is the comfort, if comfort is what you seek, that you are part of a continuity so vast that individual identity becomes almost transparent. You are temporary, yes, a brief configuration of matter and awareness that will dissolve back into its components when your time completes. But those components will continue. The atoms that form you will become other things, other beings perhaps, other expressions of whatever impulse drives the universe toward complexity and consciousness. You are not separate from the whole. You are the whole experiencing itself from one particular vantage point, for one particular duration. If the Anunnaki seeded humanity, they gave us this strange double awareness, the ability to feel both infinitely significant and cosmically insignificant simultaneously. Every thought you think feels important from the inside, every emotion real and justified. Yet from sufficient distance, from the perspective of deep time or cosmic scale, individual human concerns dissolve into the larger pattern of life, persisting, adapting, continuing, despite everything. Both perspectives are true, both matter. The tension between them creates the condition we call being human, the perpetual oscillation between feeling like the center of everything and like nothing at all. But this oscillation, uncomfortable as it can be, might be the greatest gift, because it means you can hold contradictions without resolving them. You can be both descendant of Earth and child of stars, both determined by your heritage and free to choose what you become, both insignificant speck in an indifferent cosmos and the universe's way of knowing itself. These are not problems to solve, but conditions to inhabit, paradoxes that define consciousness itself. The night continues around you, patient and encompassing. It asks nothing of you except that you exist within it, that you breathe and rest and allow the questions to settle without demanding answers. The Anunnaki may walk among humanity or may exist only in myth. They may observe from hidden positions or may have departed completely, their project complete or abandoned. They may return tomorrow or never return at all. Your sleep does not depend on knowing which is true. Your rest is not conditional on certainty. Let the weight of wondering ease now. Let the questions remain. Questions without becoming burdens. They will be there when you wake, still unanswered perhaps, but somehow more bearable for having rested beside them rather than wrestling with them through the night. Mystery is not enemy. It is companion, teacher, the space where wonder lives and grows. To live without mystery would be to live without surprise, without the possibility that everything you think you know might shift and reveal new dimensions you never suspected existed. You are Anunnaki. You are human. You are the space between where something new emerges that belongs to neither category but to itself alone. You are stardust and clay, consciousness and matter, question and answer, intertwined so completely that separation becomes meaningless. Whatever you are enough. Whatever origin story eventually proves true or remains forever uncertain, you have value that does not depend on lineage, worth that exists simply because awareness exists, because something in you reaches toward understanding, even when understanding remains perpetually just beyond reach. Sleep now, not to escape the questions, but to rest with them, to hold them gently while your body performs the essential work of restoration. The cells regenerate, the neural pathways consolidate memories, the heart continues its patient work, the breath moves without requiring your attention. The body knows what it needs even when the mind forgets. Trust that knowledge. Trust the ancient wisdom encoded in form itself, in the simple fact of being alive, of existing in time, of participating in the grand experiment of consciousness, exploring itself through countless temporary forms. The Anunnaki, whether they exist as beings or as symbols, whether they walk among us or watch from impossible distances, or live only in the stories we tell to make sense of our strangeness, they're part of you now. Not necessarily in genetic code, though perhaps there too, but certainly in imagination, in the questions you ask, in the way you look at stars and wonder if they look back. They are part of the human story now, woven into how we think about ourselves, about our potential, about what we might become if we remember what we supposedly were. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the myth serves its purpose, whether or not the history behind it can be proven. Perhaps what matters is not whether beings from the sky shaped our ancestors, but that we can conceive of such possibility, that our imagination reaches toward origins beyond the mundane, that we refuse to accept simple answers when complex ones resonate more deeply with what we feel about existence. The darkness softens around you. The boundary between waking and sleeping grows thin, permeable, easy to cross. On the other side waits rest, dreams, the nightly journey into places where logic loosens and symbolic truth becomes more real than literal fact. In dreams, the Anunnaki may visit or may remain absent. Either way, you will wake. Either way, morning will come. Either way, the question of who and what you are will continue. And that continuation is itself a kind of answer. That consciousness persists, that wonder remains, that the search itself justifies the searching. Sleep well, descendant of whatever made you. The stars wheel above in their ancient dance. The earth turns beneath you. The breath moves, the heart beats, and you, for this brief and precious moment, exist between mystery and meaning, asking questions that may have no answers but that make you human, or more than human, or beautifully both, carrying forward into morning whatever you discovered in the darkness, ready to wonder again what it all means and who you truly are. In the quiet between heartbeats, there exists a space where questions dissolve and only presence remains. Not answers arriving to replace uncertainty, but the gentle recognition that uncertainty itself is a form of knowing, a way of remaining open to what cannot yet be seen or spoken. You rest in that space now, suspended between waking and sleeping, between self and something larger, between the story you tell about yourself and the story your body tells through its ancient, automatic rhythms. The blood still flows. It has never stopped flowing through you. through your ancestors, through the unbroken chain that connects this moment to the first moment life decided to persist, to continue, to refuse the easier path of dissolution, and instead organize itself into ever more complex patterns of being. That flow is older than thought, deeper than memory, more fundamental than any question about origins. It moves whether you attend to it or not, carrying forward the project of existence that began in conditions you will never witness, driven by imperatives you cannot fully name. If Anunnaki essence moves in that current, it has become indistinguishable from everything else you are. Integrated so completely that extraction would be meaningless, separation impossible. You are not a mixture that can be unmixed, not a compound that can be separated back into pure elements. You are what happens when ancient codes interweave across time, when consciousness emerges from complexity and begins to wonder about the conditions that produced it. Whether those codes came from one source or two, whether your lineage traces to a single world or multiple, the result is the same. Something aware, something capable of awe, something that looks at stars and feels recognition even without understanding what that recognition means. The mirror you stood before at the beginning of this journey reflects the same face, but perhaps you see it differently now. Not as proof of anything, not as answer to the question of what you are, but as evidence that existence takes form. That awareness inhabits matter, that the universe produces beings who can look at themselves and wonder. The face in the mirror is temporary, a pattern held together for decades before dissolving back into the elements that composed it. But while it persists, while you persist, something experiences itself through this particular arrangement, this specific configuration of atoms and awareness. What if you are exactly what you are meant to be? Not meant in the sense of designed or intended by external intelligence, though perhaps that too. Meant in the deeper sense that the universe, through whatever processes, divine or mechanical, guided or random, produces consciousnesses like yours, beings who can wonder and create and love what they will lose. If the Anunnaki shaped you, they shaped you toward this. If evolution alone produced you, it produced this. Either way, here you are. Either way, awareness exists where it might not have. Either way, something about existence finds it worthwhile to become conscious, to experience itself from the inside, to ask questions even when no answers come. The stars above, always the stars, always watching or simply existing, indifferent but present, have seen this pattern before. They have witnessed countless beings looking upward, wondering about origins, seeking home in lights that may not recognize them. They will witness it again, long after you and your generation have dissolved back into the elements. The pattern persists not because it succeeds in finding answers, but because the searching itself seems to be what consciousness does, how awareness justifies its own existence, the way being experiences meaning even in the absence of purpose. Morning will come without requiring your permission or understanding. The sun will rise because that is what suns do, following laws written into the fabric of space-time long before anything existed that could write laws or wonder why they hold. Light will pour across the world again, illuminating the ordinary and the sacred without distinguishing between them, showing everything with equal clarity, the mundane and the mysterious, the proven and the possible, the known and the forever unknowable. When you wake into that light, the questions about Anunnaki, about hybrid heritage, about genetic memory, and ancient astronauts will still exist. But perhaps they will feel less urgent, less defining, less like problems demanding solution, and more like companions travelling alongside you, reminders that mystery enriches rather than diminishes, that not knowing keeps you curious, that certainty would close doors you may want to walk through someday. You are Anunnaki. You're human. You are both. You are neither. You are something for which we have no adequate name, because language evolved to describe surfaces, and you're trying to name depths that language cannot quite reach. The words we use, hybrid, descendant, creation, child of stars, all gesture toward truth without capturing it, pointing to something real that exists just beyond where definition can follow. But this inadequacy of language does not mean the reality is less. It means only that some truths live in feeling rather than statement, in recognition rather than proof, in the resonance you feel when certain possibilities are spoken aloud. And something in you responds yes, or maybe, or I don't know, but I want to believe it could be true. That response itself is data, information about what you are, even if it cannot prove where you came from. You want to be more than accident. You want your origins to be significant. This wanting does not make the Anunnaki real, but it makes your relationship to the question real. And perhaps that relationship is what matters most. Sleep comes finally, fully, no longer held at distance by wondering. It arrives like tide returning to shore, inevitable and gentle, covering you with darkness that feels not like ending, but like pause, like the space between notes that gives music meaning, like the rest between breaths that allows breathing to continue. In sleep, you return to something older than questions, more fundamental than identity, simpler than the complicated self you maintain while awake. You become just alive, just breathing, just participating in existence without needing to understand or justify it. The Anunnaki may walk among us. They may observe from hidden stations, checking on their project, assessing whether we have grown beyond our design or remain perpetually trapped within it. They may have departed completely, their interest exhausted, their experiment complete or abandoned. They may never have existed at all except as symbols we created to explain our own strangeness, to give form to the feeling that we are not entirely of this world, even though we're born from it. All these possibilities can coexist in the space of not knowing. You do not need to choose between them tonight. You do not need to choose ever, unless proof arrives that makes choice unavoidable. Until then, you can hold them all gently, acknowledging that each contains some fragment of possible truth, that reality is large enough to accommodate mysteries you will never solve, that existence proceeds regardless of whether you understand it. The breath moves slower now, deeper, the rhythm of the body settling into rest. Each inhalation brings not only oxygen but the patience to let questions be questions, to allow mystery to remain mysterious, to accept that some things may be known only in feeling or never known at all. Each exhalation releases not only carbon dioxide, but the need for immediate answers, the demand that reality explain itself, the insistence that you are owed certainty simply because you ask for it. Perhaps you are Anunnaki, perhaps you're human, perhaps you are the beautiful, impossible space between, the hybrid that became something neither creator nor created could have predicted. Something that looks at stars and asks why, that builds civilizations and dreams of more, that carries in its blood a memory of sky, but chooses, again and again, the earth beneath its feet. The choosing itself might be the answer, not where you came from, but what you do with what you are, regardless of origin. The Anunnaki, if they exist and watch, might be most interested not in whether you remember them, but in what you create, what you become, what you decide matters enough to fight for, or surrender to, or hold sacred. Your inheritance, genetic or symbolic, matters less than what you build with it. Sleep now, descendant of whatever made you. The stars will still be there when you wake. They have been waiting this long. They can wait a little longer, and in your dreams perhaps you will remember. Not facts or names or dates, but the feeling, the deep, quiet knowing that you are not alone, have never been alone, and that the thread connecting you to the ancient ones is as real as the breath that moves through you now. The Anunnaki may walk among us, or within us, or beyond us entirely, but what matters in this moment is simply this: you are here, you are conscious, you are asking, and that asking itself might be the most divine inheritance of all. Rest now. Let the mystery hold you. The answers, if they come, will come gently, like dawn. Until then, there is only the rhythm of breath, the patient stars, and the possibility humming quietly in your blood that you are, and have always been, more than you know. Somewhere perhaps they are watching, waiting to see if we remember, waiting to see if we are ready. And the earth turns and the stars wheel, and the descendants, known and unknown, carry forward the ancient song into whatever comes next. At the first edge of dawn, when darkness begins to thin, but light has not yet arrived, there exists a moment of perfect balance. Neither day nor night, neither sleeping nor waking. You rest there now, in that threshold space where boundaries soften, and the separation between self and world becomes permeable, where you are both the breath and what breathes, both the question and the silence that follows it. Your body has done its work through the night. Cells repaired, neural pathways consolidated, toxins filtered and expelled. The faithful machinery of biology performing its ancient task without fanfare or recognition, keeping you alive while consciousness wandered through territories it cannot name or map. You are restored, not to certainty, but to capacity, ready to carry wonder forward into another day of being human, or more than human, or beautifully uncertain about which category even applies anymore. The warmth that surrounds you is the warmth of existence itself, not metaphorically, but literally, the heat generated by metabolic processes, by the controlled burning that keeps awareness housed in flesh, by the same chemical reactions that have sustained life since the first organisms learned to harvest energy from their environment. You are warm because you are alive. You are alive because countless processes align in service of continuation. Whether those processes were designed by Anunnaki or emerged through evolution or came into being through means we have no names for, they work. And their working is sufficient. Outside, somewhere beyond walls and distance, the world prepares for another rotation. Birds will sing in languages older than human speech. Rivers will continue their patient journey towards seas. Mountains will stand, wearing down grain by grain, across epochs we cannot witness. The planet breathes through its cycles, seasons, tides, the great circulations of atmosphere and ocean that make life possible. You are part of this breathing, this turning, this vast, patient persistence of existence, asserting itself moment by moment against the entropy that would return everything to stillness. If the Anunnaki look down at this planet, they see these rhythms continuing. They see their creation, if they created us, participating in patterns larger than any single origin story. They see consciousness spreading across the globe, billions of minds simultaneously wondering and forgetting, asking and dismissing, reaching toward understanding and settling for mystery. What they think of this, if they think at all, if they exist to think, remains beyond your knowing. But perhaps their assessment matters less than what you do with the heritage they may or may not have given, the genes they may or may not have contributed, the destiny they may or may not have encoded. The mirror shows what it has always shown, a face that changes slowly, aging by increments too subtle to notice day by day, but visible across years. The same face that looked back at you yesterday will look back at you today, carrying perhaps slightly different knowledge but no definitive answers about what mixture of codes produced it. You may be Anunnaki, you may be purely terrestrial, you may be both, the hybrid whose existence bridges worlds that were never meant to touch but somehow did, producing something unexpected, something that belongs fully to neither source but creates its own category, simply by existing. The beauty is that you get to wake into not knowing and continue anyway. You get to make breakfast, speak to people you love, work toward goals that matter to you, create small beauties or large ones, participate in the ongoing experiment of consciousness regardless of whether you understand the experiment's design. The Anunnaki heritage, real or imagined, does not determine your next action. You do. Whatever code you carry, genetic or symbolic, becomes meaningful only through what you choose to express, what you decide to create, what you allow to move through you from the vast reservoir of possibility into the particular specificity of lived experience. Sleep has taught you something, perhaps. Not facts or certainties, but the deeper lesson that rest provides, that you can lay down the weight of questions and pick it up again when you are ready, that mysteries do not demand constant attention, that existence proceeds whether or not you solve its riddles. The Anunnaki will still be Anunnaki. Tomorrow, whether that word names beings or symbols, or simply the human need to explain our strangeness through stories larger than ourselves, the mystery will still be mystery, but you will have slept, and sleeping changes how you carry what cannot be known. The stars fade as light approaches. They do not disappear, but become invisible, outshone by the nearest star we call Sun, the one that makes this particular planet livable, that floods the world with photons that plants convert to sugar, that animals convert to motion and thought. The stars remain present, even when unseen, burning in the daylight sky, waiting for darkness to reveal them again. Like the Anunnaki, perhaps, present or absent depending on conditions, on what obscures or reveals, on whether you are looking in the right direction, at the right moment, with eyes capable of seeing what is there. You breathe into waking fully now, the boundary crossed without drama or announcement. Simply breathing becomes conscious breathing. Simply existing becomes aware existence. The transition is so gentle you might miss it, might not notice the moment when sleep releases you and day reclaims you. But you are back, returned from wherever consciousness goes when it loosens its grip on identity, ready to be the particular self you construct from moment to moment, even while knowing that self is temporary, negotiable, less solid than it pretends to be. The question remains, are you Anunnaki? Are they among us, within us, watching from beyond us? The question remains because that is what questions do. They persist. They accompany you through waking hours, soften during sleep, return when consciousness returns. But they are companions now, not captors. You can walk with them without being defined by them, can carry uncertainty without it becoming burden, can wonder without needing wonder to resolve into knowing. Perhaps today you will see someone and sense in them the same uncertainty, the same wondering about origins, the same feeling of being not quite at home in the world, despite being born from it. Perhaps you will recognize in their eyes the same question you carry in yours. Am I more than I seem? Is there something ancient and cosmic in this temporary form? Or am I simply what evolution produced through patient accumulation across deep time? You will not have answers for them any more than for yourself, but you will share the question, and sharing makes carrying easier. The Anunnaki, wherever and whatever they are, might smile at this if they can smile. Their creation asking questions about its creators, refusing to accept simple answers, demanding that existence make sense, while simultaneously recognizing that sense-making might be a uniquely human need that reality does not care about satisfying. If they designed you, they designed this restlessness, this perpetual reaching beyond what is toward what might be. And if you transcend your design simply by asking questions they may not have anticipated, then perhaps that transcendence is the point, the purpose hidden within the purpose, the secret intention that even they did not consciously know they were encoding. Wake now, fully and gently. Wake to a world that has not changed in any provable way, but that you might see differently after travelling through darkness and dream and doubt and wonder. Wake to the possibility that everything you thought you knew about yourself might be incomplete, that there are dimensions of your being you have not yet explored, that Anunnaki or not, you carry potentials you have barely begun to express. The sun rises because that is what suns do. You wake because that is what living beings do. The cycle continues, sleeping and waking, questioning and resting from questions, carrying mystery forward into morning light that shows everything clearly except the answers to the questions that matter most. And perhaps that is exactly right. Perhaps clarity about surfaces allows you to live, while mystery about depths allows you to wonder. And the combination is what being conscious means, what being possibly Anunnaki means, what being human, or more than human, or beautifully indefinable means. The breath moves, the heart beats, the blood carries forward whatever it has always carried. Memory, oxygen, and perhaps the genetic whispers of those who came from stars to shape clay into consciousness. You are awake now, descendant of mysteries you may never solve, child of origins you may never prove, bearer of questions that may accompany you all the way to the end of your time without ever transforming into answers. And that is enough. That has always been enough. The search itself justifies the searching. The wondering itself proves you are awake, aware, participating in the grand, strange project of existence, becoming conscious of itself through forms like yours, asking through your mouth what it means to be, to exist, to carry ancient codes forward into an uncertain future where anything might happen, and probably will. Good morning, descendant. The stars remember you, or they do not. The Anunnaki watch, or they are long gone, or they never existed except as the stories we needed to tell ourselves to make sense of our glorious strangeness. Either way, you are here. Either way, you breathe. Either way, the day waits for you to step into it and create what only you can create, aware that you're possibly divine, probably human, and certainly something that matters simply because awareness exists where it might not have, because consciousness persists in asking what it is even when no answer comes. The ancient song continues, and you, known or unknown, carry it forward.